This evening, we delve into a Zen concept that leads us toward a unique form of liberation, known as no mind, or Mushin in Japanese. This doesn't imply a blank or dull mind. Rather, it represents a state of being where life flows seamlessly and effortlessly. Zen Buddhism reveals that this effortless existence is available to us more frequently than we tend to recognize. As we begin, feel free to share your current time and location. We often find ourselves ensnared in thoughts. The active mind persistently believes it must resolve everything, manage every outcome, and prepare for all eventualities. In this relentless striving, we become weary and disconnect from a more straightforward way of existing. Zen Buddhism extends an alternative. Not a mind devoid of thought, but a mind free from attachment. When we loosen the thinking mind's grasp, a different essence arises, a tranquility and inherent wisdom that knows how to navigate each moment smoothly. The sages who unearthed this insight left behind narratives and teachings that illuminate the path. As we explore these lessons tonight, allow your breath to find its natural rhythm. Settle your body in its current position. There is nothing to decipher, nothing to cling to. The tales will unfold naturally, guiding you deeper into relaxation with each one. Simply listen and allow these timeless narratives to lead you to that serene space where the mind can finally find peace. Let's embark on our journey together. There exists a form of fatigue that is not linked to physical exertion. It arises from overthinking, a mind that incessantly comments, judges, plans, worries, and races through endless scenarios that may never materialize. Many of us are familiar with this fatigue. We lie down at night, our bodies yearning for slumber, yet our minds remain in turmoil. We complete a task, and instead of finding rest, our thoughts leap ahead to what comes next. We sit in solitude and find ourselves embroiled in arguments with those who aren't present. The thinking mind believes it is assisting us, convinced that by revisiting everything repeatedly, it can resolve our dilemmas, shield us from errors, and prepare us for what lies ahead. Yet it often leaves us drained. It provides companionship we never sought, filling the quiet with meaningless chatter. Zen does not demand that we cease thinking. Thoughts are a natural occurrence, emerging like clouds in a vast sky. The no-mind teaching points toward a different approach, revealing what becomes attainable when we stop pursuing every thought. When we release the belief that we must think through every moment and permit the thinking mind to rest, what transpires when the incessant commentary quiets? Not through force or suppression, but simply by refraining from feeding it our attention, a space is created. In that space, we uncover an alternative way of being present. Let's examine a narrative that illustrates this truth. In a bustling trade town, there lived a merchant named Sajin, who had cultivated a prosperous business over many years. He was adept with numbers, quickly assessing the worth of goods. He could discern which traders were trustworthy and which would take advantage of him if given the opportunity. His mind was perpetually engaged, calculating and strategizing his next steps. Yet, Sajin faced a dilemma that no amount of intelligence could resolve. He was unable to sleep. Each night, he would lie on his mat and shut his eyes, but his mind would remain active. It replayed the day's transactions, fretted over shipments that could be delayed, rehearsed necessary conversations with difficult suppliers, and recalculated figures he had already verified multiple times. Even when exhaustion weighed heavily on his body, his thoughts continued to whirl. He attempted to drink warm sake before bedtime, sought herbal remedies from a local healer, and tried to tire himself out with long walks. Nothing proved effective. His mind refused to rest. This lack of sleep began to affect his work, leading to small mistakes he would have previously avoided. His patience wore thin, and he snapped at his assistants for trivial errors. Dark circles formed beneath his eyes, and his wife grew concerned for his health. One morning, after yet another sleepless night, Sergeant rose before dawn and strolled through the quiet streets. He found himself at the old temple on the town's outskirts. The gates were open, so he entered, hoping the tranquil surroundings might soothe his racing thoughts. The temple was unadorned, with wooden structures arranged around a stone courtyard, ancient pine trees casting long shadows in the early light, and the fragrance of incense wafting from within. As Sergeant wandered through the courtyard, he spotted an elderly man sweeping fallen leaves. The man moved slowly and deliberately, gathering leaves into small piles with a bamboo broom, back and forth, back and forth. The gentle sound of the broom against stone was the only noise in the serene morning stillness. Sergeant watched for a while, captivated by the old man's movements. The sweeper appeared entirely at ease, his face devoid of tension, shoulders relaxed. He moved as though sweeping was the sole task in existence, perfectly content in that moment. After a while, the old man looked up and noticed Sergeant observing him. He smiled and continued his work. Sergeant approached him. "Pardon my staring," he said. "I couldn't help but notice how tranquil you seem. I am a merchant in this town. My business is thriving, yet my mind offers me no respite. Even now, when I ought to be sleeping, I find myself walking these grounds because my thoughts won't relent. You seem to have discovered something elusive to me. What is your secret?" The old sweeper leaned on his broom and pondered the question. "I have no secret," he replied simply. "I just sweep." "Just sweep?" Sergeant echoed, feeling a twinge of frustration. "But surely your mind must be engaged. You must think about something while you work." The old man gently shook his head. "When I sweep, I sweep. The broom moves, the leaves gather, my feet shift on the stones. I hear the sound of bristles against rock, the scent of morning air. Why would I complicate this with thoughts? The sweeping does itself. I am simply present with it." Sergeant frowned and replied, "But don't you consider your problems, your worries, things you need to accomplish later?" The old man responded, "Problems arise when they do." The art of sweeping. Right now, the act of sweeping was all that mattered. If I allow my thoughts to wander to other moments, I lose touch with the only moment that is real. A smile broke across his face. Moreover, mulling over problems doesn't lead to their resolution. It only burdens this moment with thoughts that aren't actually present. Sergeant lingered there, observing the old man as he resumed his task. The broom glided rhythmically, sweeping leaves into neat piles. The sound was soft yet persistent, almost musical. Something stirred within Sergeant. He recognized that he had never approached a task with the same presence as this old man while sweeping. His mind was perpetually elsewhere. At breakfast, he mapped out his plans for the day. During conversations with clients, he calculated profits. Even at night, while lying in bed, he reflected on the day past and anticipated the next. He was never wholly engaged in the moment at hand. "Can I give it a try?" Sajjan asked unexpectedly. Without a word, the old man offered him the broom. Serge began to sweep. Initially, his thoughts continued their usual pattern. He pondered how ridiculous he must appear, a prosperous trader sweeping a temple courtyard at dawn. He considered the important transactions awaiting him that day. He questioned whether this was a productive use of time. Yet, the old man stood nearby, observing. "You aren't sweeping," he said softly. "You're just thinking about sweeping. Feel the broom in your hands. Sense your feet on the ground. Listen to the sound. Just this, nothing more." Sajjan attempted again. He became aware of the smooth bamboo handle fitting in his grip. He noticed how the broom felt as it swept. He heard the gentle scraping of the bristles. He felt the coolness of the morning air brushing against his face. For a fleeting moment, his mind quieted. It was merely the act of sweeping, the motion, the sound, the leaves being gathered. In that instant, Sargent experienced something he hadn't felt in years, a simple tranquility. Not the tranquility of having resolved every issue, but the tranquility of not shouldering them, if only for a moment. The thoughts returned, as they invariably do. However, Sargent had caught a glimpse of something different. He had tasted a moment devoid of incessant mental chatter. He understood, even if just for a second, what the old man had meant. He returned the broom, expressing his gratitude to the old man. "I believe I grasp a bit of it," he remarked. "But how do you sustain this? How do you prevent your thoughts from taking over?" The old sweeper chuckled softly. "I don't maintain anything. I don't resist my thoughts. They come and go as they please. I simply keep sweeping. The thoughts aren't the issue. It's the belief that I must chase every thought. The notion that I need to solve everything through thought. That's what creates the fatigue you mention." He picked up his broom and resumed his task. "Your mind isn't your adversary. It's just very active. You've conditioned it to be so. You can also allow it to rest, not by forcing it, but by focusing your attention on what is genuinely present. The mind follows where you direct your attention. Direct your focus to this moment, to this chore, to these sensations, and the thinking mind has little to cling to. It can finally take a break." Sargent made his way home as the sun ascended over the town. That evening, before settling down, he refrained from attempting to suppress his thoughts. Instead, he concentrated on the mat beneath him. He acknowledged the weight of the blanket covering him. He listened to the sounds of the night. When thoughts surfaced, he didn't resist them. He simply redirected his attention to what was actually there. Sleep came more readily than it had in months. In the days to come, Sargent didn't transform into someone else. He remained a merchant, still calculating, planning, and sealing deals. However, a shift had occurred. He began to recognize when his mind was spinning aimlessly. He learned to redirect his focus to what was genuinely in front of him, not by battling his thoughts, but by fully engaging with whatever task he faced. He never forgot the old sweeper. Occasionally, when his mind became particularly restless, he recalled the sound of that bamboo broom against the temple stones. The simplicity of it, the serenity of just sweeping, would quiet his thoughts, if only for a brief moment. This narrative illustrates a crucial lesson about the concept of no mind. The old sweeper didn't have fewer thoughts than Sajjan. He wasn't smarter or more self-disciplined. He simply found a different way to coexist with his mind. Zen philosophy teaches that thoughts themselves aren't the issue. They arise naturally, like ripples on water. The fatigue stems from our tendency to chase every thought, to believe in every thought, to feel compelled to engage with every thought that crosses our minds. This ongoing engagement is what exhausts us. The thinking mind assumes it's indispensable. It believes that without its unending activity, everything would fall apart. It feels the need to resolve every issue, to prepare for every eventuality, to solve problems in advance. Yet, most of this activity yields little. It merely churns endlessly, wearing us down. What the old sweeper discovered is that attention is the key. The way we direct our attention shapes our overall experience. When attention fixates on the racing thoughts, we become entangled in them. When attention rests on what is truly present, the body, the breath, the simple tasks at hand, the thinking mind has less to grasp. It can relax. This isn't about suppression. We don't push thoughts away or strive for a blank mind. We simply cease to feed our thoughts with attention. We return to what is here, the feel of the broom, the weight of the blanket, the sensation of breathing. This act of returning is the practice, not achieving perfect stillness but repeatedly coming back to this moment. Buddhism teaches us that we possess more choices than we realize. We've been conditioned to automatically follow our thoughts as if we lack options. However, we can learn to allow thoughts to pass without pursuing them. We can cultivate the ability to rest in simple presence. This marks the beginning of no mind, not an absence of thoughts but liberation from their control. A tired mind isn't a broken mind. It's simply a mind that has been overworked and has forgotten how to rest. The teaching of no mind reveals that rest is always accessible, not later, after we've resolved all our problems, but now, in this very moment, by simply being present where we are. Let's delve into another story that sheds light on this truth. In the same town where Sajjan worked as a merchant, there was a young scribe named Fumio. He toiled in a government office, meticulously copying official documents by hand. The art of letting go. Each character must be crafted meticulously. There's no margin for mistakes. A single error can alter the meaning of a legal document or a contract. Fumio approached his craft with utmost seriousness. Years of training had honed his calligraphy skills, with mentors often commending his innate ability. In the early days of the office, his characters flowed effortlessly onto the page, marked by elegance and accuracy. Yet, something had shifted. In recent months, Fumio found himself grappling with his work. His hand would cramp midway through transcribing a text. The The strokes that were once fluid and assured now quivered slightly. He hesitated before each mark, doubting his decisions. The more he concentrated, the more his struggle intensified. He scrutinized his brush, finding no flaw. The ink he used was of the same high quality as always. He adjusted his posture, grip, and the paper's angle, yet nothing alleviated his discomfort. The issue, though Fumio remained unaware, lay within his mind. He had begun to monitor himself too closely. Each time he lifted the brush, a voice echoed in his head. "Ensure this stroke is straight. Don't press too hard. Recall your last mistake. Everyone depends on you. If you falter, you might lose your job." This incessant inner dialogue bred tension. His grip tightened. His shoulders slumped. His breath became shallow. He was no longer writing. He was consumed by thoughts of writing, plagued with worry and self-criticism while trying to create. The natural rhythm he once enjoyed was buried under layers of mental clutter. One afternoon, Fumio was summoned to the archive room to fetch some old documents. It was a dusty area at the back of the building, filled with records from years gone by. He seldom ventured there. While rummaging through the shelves, he noticed an elderly man at a small desk in the corner. The man was engrossed in copying something, his brush gliding smoothly across the paper. Fumio had never encountered him before. His hair was white, and his face bore deep lines, yet his hand moved with such fluidity that Fumio found himself entranced. The old man's brush seemed to dance effortlessly. There was no pause, no tension. The characters appeared on the page as if by magic. Fumio stood by, captivated, forgetting the purpose of his visit. When the old man finally set down his brush, he glanced up and acknowledged Fumio. "You are the young scribe from the front office," he remarked. "I've seen your work. You have solid training. Yet, something appears to be bothering you." Fumio was taken aback. "How could you tell?" "Your characters reveal strain. I can perceive the tension in them. I encountered this issue myself many years ago." Fumio felt a rush of relief at being recognized. "I'm uncertain of what's happened," he admitted. "I used to write with ease. Now, every stroke feels like a battle. My hand cramps. I hesitate. I make errors I never would have made previously. I've tried everything." The old man nodded thoughtfully. "Please, sit," he invited, motioning to a cushion across from his desk. "Show me your writing technique." Fumio settled down and picked up a brush. He dipped it in ink, preparing to write a simple character on a blank sheet. Instantly, the familiar tightness returned. His shoulder tensed, his breath caught in his throat. The voice resumed its commentary. "Don't mess this up. The old man is watching. Make it flawless." He executed the first stroke, but it was uneven. The old man observed without revealing any emotion. "Put the brush down," he said softly. Fumio complied, feeling embarrassed. "I want you to shut your eyes," the old man instructed. "Now, focus on your hand. Just your hand. Detect any tension within it." Fumio closed his eyes and concentrated on his hand. It was rigid, nearly clenched. He hadn't realized. Now, shift your focus to your arm, your shoulder, your breath. Fumio recognized the tension throughout his entire body. His shoulders were raised, and his breathing was rapid. He was bracing himself as if preparing for a fight. "This is your issue," the old man explained. "You're not writing with your body. You're waging a battle with your mind. Your hand understands how to form these characters. You've trained it for years, but you no longer trust it. You think you must control every minuscule movement through thought. This generates tension. The tension disrupts the stroke." Fumio opened his eyes. "But how can I produce good work if I don't pay attention to what I'm doing?" "There are two kinds of attention," the old man clarified. "One is the analytical mind attempting to exert control over everything. This is what you have been doing. It observes, evaluates, and interferes. The other type of attention is simply being present, aware yet not controlling, open yet not grasping. This is the awareness that allows the brush to glide freely." He lifted his own brush and held it lightly. "Observe. I'm not thinking about how to form the character. I've written it countless times. My hand knows the process. I simply let it move while remaining present without interference." He executed a single stroke. It was flawless. "The analytical mind believes it's being helpful," he continued, "but often the greatest assistance is allowing it to step back. Your hand has mastered calligraphy. Trust it. Your role now is not to control, but to permit. Be present without overthinking. See what unfolds." Fumio picked up his brush once more. This time, he refrained from trying to dominate the stroke. He felt the brush in his fingers, sensed the paper awaiting his touch. He allowed his hand to move without the inner voice critiquing or the mind directing every minute motion. The character that emerged was distinct. It wasn't his finest work, but a shift had occurred. The lines displayed less tension, more fluidity. "Better," the old man affirmed. "You took a step back for a moment. The brush could move more freely. This is what you need to practice. Not controlling, but permitting. Not overthinking about writing, but simply writing. The hand knows the way. The mind merely needs to cease obstructing it." In the weeks that followed, Fumio made it a point to visit the archive room whenever he could. The old man, known as Shoda, had dedicated 40 years to the back room, diligently copying ancient documents that required preservation. Through decades of experience, he had uncovered insights that Fumio was just beginning to grasp. "When I was young like you," Shoda once shared, "I too believed that thinking harder would enhance my writing. I analyzed every stroke, scrutinized every mistake, and strived for improvement through sheer mental effort. Yet, the more I exerted myself, the worse I became. It took many years to realize that the mind is not always an ally at the brush." The art of letting go. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give our minds is a chance to rest. Slowly, Fumio's calligraphy began to transform back into its former glory, and then it evolved into something even greater. His work acquired a new essence, a fluidity that had eluded him even during his most proficient days. The strokes flowed as if they had always existed on the paper, just waiting to be unveiled. No more cramped hands or tense shoulders. He could write for hours without feeling tired, for he had stopped battling with himself. The analytical mind still emerged, of course, offering its critiques, but Fumio had mastered the art of not engaging with it. He acknowledged its presence and returned to the pure act of allowing the brush to glide across the surface. Years later, when aspiring calligraphers inquired about his secret to such exquisite artistry, he would reminisce about old Shoda and smile. "I learned to step aside," he would explain. "The brush knows its path. The hand knows its movements. My role is simply to be present and allow, free from the interference of my thoughts." This narrative unveils another layer of the weary mind. Fumio's challenge wasn't a lack of ability. His hand instinctively knew how to shape each character. The issue stemmed from interference. His analytical mind, in its attempt to assist, inadvertently caused the tension that marred his creations. Zen teaches us that the body possesses its own wisdom. The thinking mind cannot dictate. When we master a skill deeply, it becomes ingrained within us. The knowledge resides in our hands, muscles, and bones. This embodied wisdom does not require the oversight of the analytical mind. In fact, such oversight often complicates matters. Think about how a child learns to walk. Initially, each step is a conscious effort, but once the skill is acquired, we walk without thought. Imagine trying to consciously control every minuscule muscle involved in walking. We would trip and fall. The skill functions because we have freed it from the constraints of analysis. The lesson of no mind points to this inherent flow. When the analytical mind steps back, what remains is not emptiness or ineptitude, but a profound intelligence that instinctively knows how to react. Our hands understand how to write. Our bodies know how to move. Something within us recognizes how to engage with each moment when we cease to interfere with excessive thought. This doesn't imply that we should never think. Thought has its place. We plan, analyze, and solve challenges. However, we don't need to be in a perpetual state of thought. We need not fill every second with mental commentary. When thought is necessary, we engage with it. When it's not needed, we can allow it to rest. This equilibrium is what the concept of no mind highlights. The Buddha taught that suffering arises from attachment. We can become attached with our hands, holding too tightly to things that are transient. But we can also become attached with our minds, clinging to thoughts, the need to resolve everything, and the belief that constant thinking will provide safety. This mental attachment drains us. Letting go brings relief. Both Sargent the merchant and Fumio the calligrapher uncovered the same truth from different perspectives. An incessant mind breeds fatigue, tension, and struggle. A mind capable of resting when needed allows inherent wisdom to surface. We don't lose anything by quieting the analytical mind. Instead, we gain access to a deeper aspect of ourselves that has always been present, waiting for the noise to fade. As you pause here now, take a moment to observe your own analytical mind. Notice how busy it has been, how hard it works, and how much it feels the need to control. There's no need for judgment or conflict. Simply observe. And perhaps, just for a fleeting moment, you can allow it to rest. Not indefinitely, nor for long, just for this breath, this instant. Let the thoughts exist without following them. Let your focus settle into the simple reality of being present. This marks the beginning of no mind. It's not an achievement to strive for. Rather, it's a letting go that is eternally accessible. Take a gentle breath now. Feel the air as it enters your body and then exits. There's nothing you need to decipher, nothing you need to grasp. Simply rest here, permitting the breath to flow naturally. Allow this moment to unfold exactly as it is. We place immense faith in our analytical minds. We believe that if we can comprehend something through thought, we genuinely understand it. We analyze, reason, and solve. This is how we were conditioned to learn. This is how we perceive knowledge. Yet, there exists another form of knowing that runs deeper than thought. It resides in our hands, bodies, and in the silent intelligence that requires no words. Watch a grandmother kneading bread dough. She doesn't contemplate how much pressure to exert or when the texture is right. Her hands simply know. This understanding has emerged from years of practice, yet it no longer demands conscious thought. It has become an integral part of her. We all possess this kind of knowledge. How your feet locate the stairs in the dark, how your hands catch something before you even realize it's falling, how your body instinctively balances, breathes, and heals while you sleep. None of this necessitates the analytical mind. It occurs beyond thought, guided by a wisdom we seldom acknowledge. The teaching of no mind encourages us to recognize this deeper intelligence. It's not meant to replace thinking, but to help us realize that thought is not the sole means of understanding. When we trust the body's learning, when we let our hands do what they instinctively know, a natural flow emerges. The analytical mind can rest because it isn't required for every task. Let's delve into a story that illustrates this truth. In a riverside town renowned for its exquisite fabrics, there lived a silk dyer named Yuma. Her family had been dyeing silk for 5 generations. The craft had been handed down from grandmother to mother to daughter, with each generation mastering the delicate art of infusing color into cloth. Yuma began her education as a young child. Before she could read or write, she recognized the scent of a dye vat ready for use. She would sit beside her mother in the workshop, observing the silk being lowered into the steaming vats. The air was saturated with earthy aromas. Wooden paddles hung from the walls, while bolts of undyed silk sat in neat piles, pale as morning clouds. She learned to identify the various plants and minerals that produce diverse colors. Indigo for deep blue, derived from leaves that required months of fermentation to yield their hue. Safflower for red, its petals dried and meticulously processed through numerous careful steps. The alchemy of indigo. Yuma watched as the gardenia boiled, the water transforming into a shimmering gold. Each dye possessed its own character, specific needs, and hidden mysteries. Her mother guided her small hands, teaching her to feel the silk, to intuit when the fabric had absorbed enough color. Don't overthink it, her mother advised. Let your hands learn. They understand this better than your mind. Initially, Yuma struggled to grasp this concept. She attempted to memorize guidelines, counting the seconds the silk spent submerged. looking for visible changes that she could articulate. Yet, her results were erratic. Colors would sometimes be too light or too dark, and at times the dye would fail to adhere. Then, around her 10th year of practice, a transformation occurred. She ceased her struggle to comprehend. Instead, she immersed herself in the process day after day, and slowly her hands began to learn what her mind had yet to understand. By the time Yuma reached adulthood, she had become the foremost dyer in the area. Traders journeyed from far-off cities to procure her silk. The colors she produced were richer, more enduring, and more vibrant than anyone else's. When inquired about her secret, she found it challenging to articulate. The reality was that Yuma no longer thought about dyeing. As she worked, her hands moved instinctively. She would submerge the silk into the vat, and something within her would know precisely when to retrieve it, not through counting or observing the color, but through an innate sense. A sensation in her fingertips, a physical intuition, an understanding that transcended words. One autumn, a scholar named Tadashi visited her town. He was compiling a book on traditional crafts and wished to record Yuma's dyeing methods. Arriving in her studio with paper and ink, he was eager to document every nuance of her technique. Yuma graciously welcomed him and permitted him to observe her work. That morning, she was preparing a batch of indigo dye, renowned for being particularly tricky. Indigo is capricious. The dye vat must be maintained under meticulous conditions. The silk requires precise dipping and lifting intervals. If it remains submerged too long, the color turns murky. If pulled out too quickly, it won't adhere. Tadashi observed her closely as she set up the vat, bombarding her with inquiries. What temperature should the water reach? How much indigo should be added per measure of water? How can you tell when the vat is ready? Yuma attempted to respond, but his questions posed a challenge. She had never measured the temperature with a thermometer. She simply held her hand near the surface to gauge if it felt right. The indigo was never weighed. She added it until the vat appeared and smelled appropriate, trusting her intuition to determine the right amount. But how do you know? Tadashi persisted. Surely there must be a method, a rule you adhere to. Yuma pondered this. In my youth, my mother taught me. She guided my hands and revealed what to sense. Initially, I couldn't grasp what she felt, but after years of practice, my hands learned. Now they possess knowledge I can't articulate. Tadashi frowned as he jotted down notes, appearing unsatisfied with her explanation. Yuma lifted a piece of silk and submerged it into the indigo vat, holding it under the surface, her eyes half closed, her focus directed inward. After an interval that seemed arbitrary to Tadashi, she removed the cloth, revealing a greenish, lackluster hue. It doesn't look blue, he remarked. Just wait, Yuma replied. As the silk met the air, something extraordinary occurred. The dull green began to transform. Gradually, like the dawn breaking, the fabric shifted to the most exquisite deep blue Tadashi had ever encountered, reminiscent of a summer night sky just after sunset. How did you know when to lift it? He asked, astonished. Yuma smiled. I felt it was ready. But what did you feel? Tadashi pressed. Yuma paused for a moment. I can't fully articulate it. There's a point when the silk has absorbed what it needs. The weight changes subtly. The silk's movement in the liquid alters. My hands sense it is time. However, if I consciously try to analyze it or watch for signs, I miss them. I can only perceive them when I'm not actively trying. Tadashi spent 3 days at Yuma's workshop, filling numerous pages with notes on temperatures, timings, and proportions. He documented everything he observed. When he departed, he believed he had comprehended her techniques sufficiently to instruct others. A year later, Yuma learned that Tadashi had published his book, devoting an entire chapter to indigo dyeing, filled with exact measurements and meticulous instructions. She also discovered that several individuals had attempted to replicate his instructions but failed. Their results were adequate but lacked the brilliance of her work. One of these unsuccessful dyers eventually made the journey to consult Yuma, frustrated and perplexed. "I followed the instructions to the letter," he stated. "I measured everything. I timed everything, yet my indigo is flat and dull compared to yours. What am I doing wrong?" Yuma invited him to observe her process closely. As she readied a new batch, she allowed him to watch intently. When it was time to dip the silk, she paused. "Place your hand near the vat," she instructed. "What do you feel?" He extended his hand. "It's warm." "What else?" She encouraged him to dig deeper. He concentrated. "I'm not sure. Just warmth." "There's more," Yuma replied gently. "The vat has a presence, a redness. When it's right, you can sense it welcoming the cloth. However, this feeling cannot be quantified or documented. It can only be learned through practice, through trial and error, through persistence. My mother stood by me for 10 years before my hands truly understood." The scholar's book captured the technical aspects of the craft, but the essence of it resided in the hands, and hands must learn through experience. The dyer stayed with Yuma for several months, initially attempting to think his way to mastery. He calculated, analyzed, and reasoned, taking notes on everything, striving to identify patterns in her actions, rules he could record and adhere to. Yet his outcomes remained mediocre. "You are still caught up in your thoughts," Yuma observed one morning. "I can see it in your movements. They are stiff and deliberate. You're overthinking each action instead of allowing it to unfold naturally." "But how do I stop thinking?" he asked, frustration evident in his voice. "I can't just shut off my mind." "You don't need to silence it," Yuma replied. "Simply stop demanding it to perform what it cannot. Your mind cannot feel the dye. The wisdom of the unseen. You cannot sense when the silk is ready with your mind alone. It is your hands that must guide you. Allow your thoughts to rest as your hands gain experience." Initially, he didn't grasp this concept, but he had no alternatives. Thus, he persevered. Day after day, he stood by the vats, lowering and raising silk, facing failures and attempting anew. Gradually, as the weeks rolled by, a transformation began. He ceased overthinking. Instead, he committed to the task at hand daily, allowing his hands to learn what his mind struggled to comprehend. He focused not on thoughts of failure, but on tangible sensations. The heaviness of damp silk, the scent of the vat at various temperatures, the subtle shifts in color that evolved so slowly they seemed imperceptible until they reached completion. He started to perceive details he had previously overlooked. The distinct feel of silk when it had absorbed just the right amount of dye. The unique shimmer of the liquid in the vat when conditions aligned perfectly. These nuances eluded explanation or documentation. They were becoming familiar to his hands. One morning, he retrieved a piece of silk from the indigo and intuitively recognized its perfection, without understanding how he knew. The hue wasn't as exquisite as Yuma's work. Not yet, but it radiated vitality in a manner his earlier attempts had not. "There," Yuma remarked, beaming. "Your hands are starting to recall." He regarded her with newfound insight. This knowledge couldn't be imparted through books, could it? Books instruct the analytical mind, Yuma responded. Yet some wisdom exists beyond thought. It must be shared directly, through experience and perseverance. The analytical mind can guide the way, but the hands must traverse the journey. This narrative illustrates a fundamental aspect of the wisdom residing within our bodies. Yuma's expertise was beyond verbal explanation since words pertain to rational thought, while her skill had transcended that realm. It had integrated into her hands, her senses, her entire essence. Zen philosophy teaches us that such understanding is not lesser than intellectual comprehension. In many respects, it is richer. When something is genuinely learned, it no longer demands conscious thought. It becomes instinctive, effortless, immediate. The analytical mind can recede, for it is no longer essential. We observe this in various facets of life. The musician whose fingers effortlessly find the correct notes. The chef who discerns the readiness of a dish by aroma and sound. The mother who intuitively understands her child's needs before a word is uttered. All these experiences embody a knowledge that cannot be articulated in instructions. The teaching of no mind honors this profound intelligence. It reminds us that we are more than our thoughts. We are bodies that have acquired countless skills. We are hands that remember. We are entities with access to insights that thought alone cannot reach. Let us delve into another tale that unveils more of this truth. Along a broad river that posed challenges for crossing, there resided a ferryman named Tomo. He had been born without sight. He had never witnessed the river he traversed daily, never seen the passengers aboard his vessel, nor glimpsed the distant shore he aimed for with each journey. His mother had wept upon his birth, unable to open his eyes. His father had speculated on the fate of a blind son. Yet Tomo's grandfather, an experienced ferryman himself, had taken him under his wing. "The river is indifferent to your ability to see it," he had said. "What matters is if you can perceive it." From a young age, Tomo learned the river through touch and sound. His grandfather would take him out on the boat, sharing none of his visual observations. Instead, he would guide Tomo's hands to the pole, instructing, "Feel that? The current is pushing us toward the sandbar. Adjust." He would fall silent during their crossings, later asking, "Where are we now? What messages does the water convey?" At first, Tomo felt only bewilderment. The pole was merely a pole. The water was simply water. Yet, his grandfather's patience prevailed. Year after year, they navigated together, and gradually, the river began to communicate with Tomo in a nonverbal language. By the time his grandfather passed away, Tomo had become intimately familiar with every inch of that river, not through sight, which he had never known, but through a deep understanding that encompassed his entire being. Remarkably, Tomo was regarded as the most reliable ferryman on the river. This confounded many travelers. The river posed dangers. Strong currents lurked beneath the surface. Sandbars shifted with the seasons. Hidden rocks awaited in unexpected locations. Other ferrymen, those with keen eyesight who had spent years working the river, sometimes ran aground or lost their way in fog. But Tomo never faltered. One day, a young ferryman named Genji sought to learn from Tomo. Genji had been operating a different section of the river and had grown frustrated. Despite his keen eyesight and diligent focus, he struggled in challenging conditions. When mist rose from the water or storms darkened the sky, uncertainty clouded his judgment, leading to errors. He had heard tales of the blind ferryman who never erred and was skeptical. He came to witness it firsthand. Tomo welcomed him aboard for a journey. The day was clear, the water tranquil. Genji observed as Tomo untied the boat and pushed away from the bank. The movements of the blind man were confident and unhurried as he positioned himself at the pole, guiding the boat into the current. Genji scrutinized closely, attempting to discern Tomo's unique approach. The old man appeared to be listening, his head slightly tilted. His hands on the pole were light and sensitive, making constant minor adjustments in response to cues that Genji was unable to perceive. "How do you know where to steer?" Genji inquired. "I listen," Tomo replied. "The river is always speaking. The sound of the current reveals where the deep water flows. The echoes from the shore indicate how far we've traveled. The sensations beneath my feet inform me of the currents at play." Genji listened intently but could only hear the general murmur of water. "I hear the river, but it all sounds the same to me." Tomo smiled. "When you depend on your eyes, your ears become complacent. You observe the water and assume you understand its behavior, but much lies hidden beneath the surface. I cannot be deceived by appearances. I rely on the essence of things." They reached the river's midpoint, where the current surged most powerfully. Genji sensed the boat being nudged sideways. In that moment, he would have fought against it, struggling to maintain a straight course. But Tomo approached things differently. He allowed the current to guide the boat, adjusting his position so that the river's force actually assisted them in reaching their goal. "You work in harmony with the river," Genji noted. "I have no choice," Tomo answered. "I cannot see it, so I cannot resist it. I can only sense its movements and react. The river is far more powerful than I am. To fight against it is to invite defeat. If I attune myself to its flow, we both achieve what we seek." As they neared the opposite bank, a gentle mist began to rise from the surface of the water. Genji felt a familiar sense of unease. In fog, he easily lost his sense of direction. Landmarks vanished. Estimating distance became daunting. He had grounded the boat in such conditions multiple times. Yet Tomo showed no signs of worry. He kept maneuvering the pole with steady precision, making adjustments that Genji couldn't quite grasp. When they reached the far shore, precisely at their intended spot, Genji was taken aback. "How did you manage to find the landing in this fog?" "I still can't see it," Tomo admitted. "But I felt it," he added simply. "The water's movement changes near the bank. The sounds shift too. And there's a scent when we are close, damp earth, the vegetation along the water's edge. I've crossed this river countless times. My body knows the way." In the following weeks, Genji frequently returned to learn from Tomo. The elder did not lecture or provide extensive explanations. Instead, he instructed Genji to shut his eyes while crossing. Initially, Genji felt vulnerable and terrified without his sight. He had no idea where they were or what was happening. His grip on the pole was too tight. His body was tense with anxiety. "You are resisting," Tomo remarked. "You are attempting to visualize with your mind what your eyes cannot perceive. Stop trying. Just feel." This was more challenging than any lesson Genji had ever encountered. Throughout his life, he had tackled challenges by thinking more deeply. Now, he was being asked to think less and to trust in something he wasn't even aware he possessed. The initial crossings with his eyes closed were disorienting. Genji felt lost and powerless. More than once, he considered opening his eyes and abandoning this peculiar training. Yet something compelled him to persist. Perhaps it was the memory of Tomo navigating the mist with such assured calm. Perhaps it was a dawning realization that his own methods had limitations. Tomo guided him patiently. "Feel the current through the pole. It's communicating with your hands. Sense how the boat tips and sways. It's revealing the nature of the water below us. Listen. The shore has a different sound than the open water. The deep channel sounds distinct from shallow areas." Day after day, Genji practiced with his eyes shut. Gradually, almost miraculously, he began to perceive things he had never recognized with open eyes. The river's language unfolded to him through vibrations in the pole, the movement of the boat, and sounds he had always heard but never truly listened to. He discovered that the current altered its tone based on depth. Shallow waters produced a different texture and sound when the pole grazed the bottom. Approaching the bank created subtle echoes he had never consciously acknowledged. He even learned that the wind brushing against his face conveyed information about his location on the river. One afternoon, a sudden storm engulfed them while they were in the midst of a crossing. The sky darkened, and rain hammered down on the water. Visibility plummeted. Genji would have panicked under such conditions in the past. But now, equipped with everything he had learned, he found himself becoming tranquil. Unable to see, he ceased trying to do so. He tuned into the boat. He felt the current. He listened to the rain splashing against the water surrounding them. From these sensations, he instinctively knew which direction to take. They reached the bank without incident. Genji opened his eyes as the rain began to let up. His hand shook, but not from fear, from or at what his body had instinctively accomplished. "I couldn't see anything," he said to Tomo, "but I knew where we were." I knew what to do. How is this even possible? Your eyes are beneficial, Tomo replied gently. Yet they have made you overlook your other senses. They have led you to believe that seeing is the sole means of knowing. Now you are starting to remember what your body has always known. The understanding that doesn't require sight. The knowledge that comes through your hands, ears, skin, your entire being. Genji returned to his section of the river transformed as a ferry operator. He still relied on his vision. He was not blind, and sight remained advantageous. However, he no longer depended solely on what he could see. He felt the river now. He listened to it. He sensed elements beneath the surface that his eyes couldn't reveal. In challenging circumstances, when mist or darkness obscured his vision, he no longer felt helpless. He merely redirected his focus to the awareness that resided in his body, the understanding that didn't rely on sight. The river continued to communicate with him even when he could not visually perceive it. His hands retained the memory of the path. This tale enriches our comprehension of the wisdom that exists beyond mere thought. Tomo's blindness was not a hindrance as many believed. It compelled him to cultivate a different form of understanding. In many ways, this understanding proved to be more dependable than sight alone. The Buddha taught that we cling to our usual modes of perception. We tend to think that our typical way of seeing things reflects the true nature of reality. Yet our habitual perceptions are restrictive. They reveal certain facets of reality while obscuring others. When we loosen our grip on these familiar perspectives, alternative forms of understanding become accessible. Genji realized that his eyes, despite their practical benefits, had actually constrained him. He had trusted them so completely that his other senses had dulled. By learning to close his eyes and directly connect with the river, a whole new realm of information unfolded before him. This aligns with the teaching of no mind. It's not about rejecting our usual capabilities, but recognizing that they are not the only skills we possess. The analytical mind is valuable, but it's not the sole type of intelligence we have. The body knows things. The senses comprehend things. Something deeper than thought understands how to respond when we cease to interfere. When we trust this deeper awareness, when we stop believing that we must think our way through every moment, a natural flow can emerge. Actions arise effortlessly. Responses occur without hesitation. Life flows through us more smoothly as we no longer obstruct it with excessive mental exertion. Embracing stillness. Take a gentle breath. Now, feel your body resting in its current position. Acknowledge the quiet intelligence that keeps your heart beating, your lungs inhaling, and your blood circulating. All of this occurs without the need for your conscious mind. It unfolds naturally, guided by a wisdom that transcends thought. Allow yourself to rest in that wisdom now, permitting it to support you. In Zen philosophy, there is a teaching regarding the concept of self-forgetting. This does not imply losing our memories or becoming confused about our identity. It points to something far more nuanced. A part of us observes everything we do. It comments, it judges, and it worries about how we are perceived by others. This observer creates a division within us. One aspect takes action, while another observes and critiques that action. Zen illustrates that when this observer dissolves, even momentarily, something extraordinary occurs. Action becomes unified. We are no longer at odds with ourselves. The Buddha frequently spoke about the weight of self-concern, how we endure suffering due to our constant need to protect and enhance this sense of self. We fret over how the self appears to others. We dread the possibility of the self failing or experiencing embarrassment. We measure ourself against others, feeling either superior or inferior. This incessant mental activity breeds tension and separation. It diverts us from direct experience and pulls us into a narrative about ourselves experiencing the moment. Buddhist practice encourages us to scrutinize this self that seems so solid. Upon closer examination, we discover it resembles a process rather than a fixed entity. Thoughts arise and dissipate. Sensations come and go, a continuous flow mistaken for something static. When we cease clinging to this constructed self, when we forget to sustain it, even briefly, we uncover a freedom that has always been present. This act of forgetting is not something we force. We cannot exert ourselves to forget who we are. That very effort stems from the self attempting to achieve something. Instead, forgetting occurs organically when we become fully engaged in our activities. The musician immersed in the music, the gardener absorbed in their garden, the child completely wrapped up in play. In these instances, the observer vanishes because attention has become total. There is merely the activity occurring on its own. This is what Zen refers to as no mind in action. It is not the absence of awareness, but rather awareness devoid of an observer standing apart. Let us delve into a story that embodies this truth. In a mountain village renowned for its musical heritage, there lived a young man named Kira who played the bamboo flute. He had been studying since childhood, and his instructor often commended his innate talent. When Kira played solo, whether in the forest or by the stream near his home, the music from his flute was indescribably beautiful. It seemed to emanate from a depth beyond mere technique. Birds would cease their songs to listen. Even the wind appeared to pause. However, Kira faced a dilemma that brought him great distress. Whenever others were present, his playing transformed. His fingers, so fluid and confident when he was alone, became rigid and uncertain. His breath, so natural and full in solitude, turned shallow and constricted. The music that had once flowed so effortlessly now stumbled and faltered. It wasn't that he played poorly in front of others. His technique remained intact. The notes were correct, but something vital was absent. The vibrancy that filled his solitary performances vanished entirely. What remained was competent but hollow, resembling a paper flower rather than one that had blossomed from the earth. Kira attempted everything he could think of to conquer this challenge. He practiced for extended hours each day, rising before dawn to play until his fingers ached. He performed for small gatherings of friends and family, hoping to acclimate to being watched. He stood before mirrors, playing to his own reflection, trying to grow comfortable with being seen. He firmly reassured himself that there was nothing to fear, that listeners wished for his success, that he had played flawlessly countless times alone and could do so again. Yet, none of it helped. The instant he became aware of listeners, a tightness gripped him, and the music faded. It felt as though two distinct musicians resided within the same body, one who could play with effortless beauty and another who could scarcely remember how to hold the flute. The suffering this caused him was immense. Music was his life. It was his true calling. To possess this gift yet be unable to share it felt like a form of imprisonment. He became reclusive, avoiding social events where he might be asked to perform. He even began to contemplate abandoning music altogether and finding a new path in life. His teacher, an elderly man named Master Endo, observed this struggle with compassion. He had witnessed similar challenges in other students throughout his many years of teaching. He understood that the issue lay not in Kira's fingers, breath, or technique, but rather in his mind. One autumn afternoon, Master Endo invited Kira to join him for a walk in the mountains. They ascended for several hours along a narrow path through the forest. The old man spoke little, and Kira was too consumed by his own thoughts to engage in conversation. Eventually, they arrived at a small clearing next to a waterfall. The water cascaded from a great height, crashing onto the rocks below and filling the air with mist and sound. Master Endo settled onto a fallen log and motioned for Kira to sit beside him. They remained silent for a long while, watching the waterfall. Then Master Endo said, "Play something." Kira hesitated. His teacher was watching. The familiar tightness began to rise in his chest, but he took out his flute and lifted it to his lips. The first notes were stiff, just as he had anticipated. He could feel himself observing himself, judging each sound, worrying about his teacher's thoughts. The music emerged thin and lifeless. But then, something unexpected occurred. The sound of the waterfall was so overpowering that Kira could barely hear his own playing. The roar of the falling water consumed the notes almost as soon as they escaped his flute. He realized he could not monitor his performance in the usual way. He could not hear well enough to critique himself. With his self-criticism drowned out by the waterfall, something within him released. His fingers began to move more freely. His breath deepened. He ceased to think about how he sounded and simply played. The music that emerged was unlike anything he had created in front of another person. It was alive. It flowed. The melody seemed to emerge from the same essence as the cascading water, pure and inevitable. As he finally set down the flute, Kira became aware that he had momentarily forgotten about his instructor's presence. He had not only lost track of performing, he had entirely forgotten himself. In that moment, there was only the music, devoid of a player to separate from it. Master Endo beamed at him. "That is the sound I perceive when you play alone," he said. "That is what fades away when you scrutinize yourself too closely." Kira felt a slight tremor within him. But how can I rediscover that state? The waterfall won't always be there to mask my self-awareness. "The waterfall is merely an illusion," his teacher responded. "It allowed you to forget your self-judgment by drowning it out. However, you don't require a waterfall. You must comprehend what transpired. When you cease to listen to yourself, you were able to play freely. When you forgot to observe and critique, the music flowed effortlessly. The observer in your mind, the one who critiques, worries, and compares, is what obstructs the flow." Master Endo picked up a small pebble and tossed it into the pool beneath the waterfall, where it vanished into the swirling waters without a trace. When you perform for others, you have two personas within you. One plays the flute while the other observes the player and offers commentary. Good note, bad note. They listen. What do they think of me? Am I making errors? This second persona, the observer, is the source of your troubles. When you play solo, he quiets down because there's no one to impress or fear. In the presence of others, however, he becomes quite vocal. The music cannot flow because you are split. A portion of you is playing, while another part watches and judges. The performance becomes self-conscious and loses its authenticity. Kira grasped the concept. He had sensed this internal division but had never recognized it so explicitly. How can I silence the observer? You cannot confront him head-on. If you attempt to suppress him, you only add another layer of observation, watching yourself watch yourself. This exacerbates the situation, not alleviates it. Master Endo offered a gentle smile. Instead, you must focus entirely on the music itself. Shift your attention from how you are playing to the music itself. Listen as if you were part of the audience. Allow yourself to be enveloped by the sound, the emotions, the essence of each note. When your attention is fully immersed, there will be no room left for observation. The observer will starve because you provide him with nothing. They lingered by the waterfall until sunset painted the sky. As they descended the mountain in the twilight, Kira dedicated himself to practicing the insights his teacher had imparted. It was a challenging endeavor. The tendency to self-observe was deeply rooted in him. Countless times, he would begin to play, only to feel the observer emerge, critiquing and judging. Yet, he continued to redirect his focus back to the music itself, not how he was creating it, but to what was being created, listening as an audience member would. Gradually, a shift occurred. There were moments when the observer receded, allowing the music to flow freely, even in the presence of others. These instances became more frequent as he practiced. He learned to recognize when he was fracturing his attention and how to mend that division. One winter evening, Kira received an invitation to perform at a village gathering. A crowd had gathered to listen, including Master Endo. As he surveyed the sea of attentive faces, the familiar fear gripped him. The observer in his mind began its routine commentary. They are all watching you. Don't make any errors. What will they think? However, Kira recalled the lesson learned by the waterfall. He allowed his focus to plunge fully into the music. He disregarded the observer and embraced the notes instead. The first phrase flowed from his flute, and he surrendered to it as if he were hearing it for the first time, as if someone else were performing. The observer attempted to intrude several times during his performance, but each time, Kira gently redirected his focus back to the sound itself, and with each shift, the division healed, and the music flowed seamlessly. When he concluded, the room fell silent. Then, voices erupted all at once, filled with a sentiment Kira had never experienced in response to his playing before. They were moved. The music had resonated with them. Later, Master Endo discovered him standing alone outside, gazing up at the starry winter sky. Tonight, you forgot yourself. the old teacher remarked. The music played itself. You were not an obstacle. Kira nodded, feeling a sense of lightness he hadn't felt before. I believe I understand now. When I cease to observe myself, the self ceases to be an issue. It was never my playing that was hindered. It was my focus on my performance. When I concentrate on the music rather than on myself creating it, everything flows seamlessly. This is the essence of the teaching. Master Endo explained that in music, in life, and in all things, the self that critiques and worries creates a sense of separation. When we forget that self, even if just for a moment, we become whole. The flute plays the flute. The music creates itself. We are not the ones doing it. We simply allow it to unfold. This narrative illustrates what Zen signifies by forgetting the self. Kira did not transform into someone else. He did not lose his memory or identity. He simply stopped separating himself from his own experience, observing and judging. When he forgot to uphold that division, when his focus became entirely absorbed in the music rather than in himself creating music, the natural flow returned. We can recognize this experience in our own lives. Those moments when we were so engrossed in an activity that we lost track of time, when we looked up and realized hours had flown by unnoticed. In those moments, the observer was absent. We were wholly engaged in what we were doing. Let us consider another story that illuminates this teaching from a different perspective. In a land renowned for its ancient temples, there lived a stonecutter named Hiro, who carved statues for the temple grounds. He had inherited his craft from his father, who had learned from his father before him. For 3 generations, their lineage had been shaping stone into representations of the Buddha, Bodhisattvas, and protective guardians. Hiro was adept in his trade. He understood how to read the stone, to discern the strengths and weaknesses concealed within each block. His technique was solid, his tools well cared for, and his knowledge of traditional forms comprehensive. The statues he created were accurate in every proportion and detail. Yet, something felt amiss. Hiro sensed it, though he could not articulate it. When he gazed upon his completed masterpiece, it struck him as somehow lacking. The shapes were accurate, yet they lacked vitality. They resembled sculptures rather than living entities frozen in time. Clients expressed their satisfaction. Temples embraced his creations, and he received ample payment. Fellow stone masons admired his craftsmanship. By all external measures, he had achieved success. Yet, Hiro was acutely aware of the truth. His sculptures were mere exteriors, beautiful, perhaps, but devoid of the essence that infused the works of the great masters. He had encountered pieces crafted by those old masters that were unlike his own. Statues from centuries past that still appeared vibrant, with faces exuding true empathy and hands poised as though ready to move. There existed a Buddha in the temple of the neighboring valley, carved 4 centuries ago. Hiro had traveled there countless times, drawn to sit before it. That stone visage emitted a quality that his work failed to capture, a sense of peace, presence, and the feeling that the Buddha was not merely depicted in stone but rather resided within it. Something inherent in those ancient sculptures transcended mere skill. Hiro was at a loss regarding how to replicate it, despite years of effort. He delved into age-old techniques, scrutinizing the ancient works for hidden truths in the chisel marks. He prayed for insight. Yet, nothing shifted. His efforts remained technically proficient yet spiritually void. His father had passed away when Hiro was a child, too early to impart any secret that might have bridged the gap. Hiro mastered the techniques, proportions, and proper grip of the chisel, but perhaps there existed something more, something his father hadn't had the chance to convey. One spring, Hiro received a significant commission to carve a large Buddha for a new temple hall. It was a pivotal task, one that could either cement his reputation or reveal his shortcomings. He selected his stone with care, choosing a stunning block of granite imbued with subtle grey-blue hues. He gathered his tools, devised his plans, and then commenced the carving. The process unfolded as it always did, competent yet lifeless. Frustration welled within Hiro. He envisioned the statue as it should be, picturing the serenity, presence, and compassion radiating from the Buddha's face. Yet his hands failed to manifest it. The features took shape correctly, but somehow they felt devoid of life. Then, amid the project, Hiro received devastating news. His former mentor, Master Genshin, the one who had guided his training after his father's passing, had fallen gravely ill. Hiro abandoned his work without hesitation and rushed to his teacher's side. He arrived just in time. Master Genshin was frail, his breathing labored, yet his eyes remained clear. Hiro sat beside him throughout the night, holding his hand and speaking little. There was nothing left unsaid from their years of collaboration. Now, it was simply about being present together. As dawn approached, Master Genshin spoke his final words. "You carve well," he whispered, "but you strive too hard. You obstruct the stone." Before Hiro could inquire about his meaning, his teacher had departed. Hiro returned to his workshop enveloped in profound sorrow. The unfinished Buddha awaited him, the face still emerging from the granite. But Hiro found himself incapable of working. He sat in the workshop and wept. He wandered through the forests, sensing his teacher's absence in every beauty he encountered. Food lost its appeal, and sleep eluded him. He was engulfed in grief. The workshop that once felt like home now felt desolate. His tools lay untouched, dust accumulating on the unfinished stone. Occasionally, Hiro would enter the workshop and stand before the Buddha with chisel in hand, yet he could not bring himself to carve. The stone seemed to taunt him, awaiting hands that had lost their fervor. Days turned into weeks. The temple officials inquired about the progress of their Buddha, but Hiro could not reply. Grief had consumed him. He often reflected on his teacher's last words. "You strive too hard. You obstruct the stone." What did it signify? Hiro had always believed that hard work was the key to mastery, that careful observation of his craft would lead to improvement, that control was essential for creating beauty. Had his teacher perceived something different? A flaw in his approach that remained hidden from Hiro? One morning, without conscious decision, Hiro found himself standing before the unfinished statue, a chisel in hand. He had no recollection of picking it up, nor of walking to the workshop. The weight of grief had transformed into a fog, and he moved through it in a daze. He began to carve. Thoughts of technique, proportion, or how the statue ought to appear vanished from his mind. The only thing that filled him was sorrow. The loss of his mentor consumed him entirely. There was no space for anything else, no room for the internal voice that typically critiqued his work, no space for the observer who assessed each stroke. Only grief and hands that moved. His hands began to carve. The chisel met the stone, the sound reverberating in the empty workshop. Time slipped away unnoticed. He was not observing himself work. He was not judging each stroke. He simply existed, carving, as grief flowed through him and into the stone. Tears streamed down his face, unacknowledged. The chisel continued its rhythm. The stone kept yielding. When he finally paused, the sun had dipped below the horizon. Hiro stepped back to observe what he had created. The Buddha's face gazed back at him. It was alive. There was no other way to describe it. The stone visage radiated a presence that none of his previous works had captured. The expression was serene, yet not vacant, compassionate, yet not overly sentimental. The eyes seemed to perceive him, and the lips seemed on the verge of speaking. Hiro sank to his knees before his own creation, weeping again, but this time it was different. He finally grasped a truth. For years, he had aimed to carve magnificent statues, scrutinizing his technique, assessing each stroke, striving for a specific effect. This striving, this watching, this constant self-scrutiny had birthed the very emptiness he discerned in his work. Today, in his sorrow, he had forgotten to try. He had forgotten to observe himself. He had forgotten to be Hiro, the stonecutter, striving to create art. Only the act of carving had transpired, his hands moving freely, unencumbered by oversight. The art of letting go. This was the lesson imparted by his mentor. You stand in the way of the stone. When Hiro observed, critiqued, and attempted to control, he obstructed the flow of creativity that sought to pass through him and into his craft. It was only when he lost himself, when sorrow washed away the observer within, that his hands could finally execute what they had always instinctively known how to achieve. In the ensuing months, Hiro completed the Buddha and proceeded to produce numerous other pieces. Not every creation matched the brilliance of that grief-filled moment. The observer would often return, bringing with it the familiar void. Yet Hiro had gained understanding of the phenomenon. He recognized that his finest work emerged when he ceased to be Hiro, the stone-cutter shaping stone. When he simply carved, he discovered methods to aid himself in letting go. At times, he would work in dim lighting, unable to see well enough to evaluate. Other times, he carved in sync with his breath, allowing it to direct his hands. Occasionally, he would wait until he felt that peculiar stillness within, the absence of the observer, before commencing. The temple officials who received the finished Buddha were astonished. They had anticipated commendable work from Hiro but had not expected this. The statue gained notoriety across the region. Visitors traveled great distances to meditate before it. They claimed it bestowed tranquility upon them. They believed the Buddha's gaze penetrated their souls. Hiro understood that this extraordinary quality had not been crafted through mere skill or effort. It had flowed through him on a day when he was too shattered to interfere. The grief was profound. Yet, it was also a blessing. It revealed to him the possibilities that arise when the self that observes and judges falls silent. Years later, a young apprentice inquired about how Hiro brought such vibrant statues to life. The seasoned carver paused to reflect before responding. "I learned to step aside," he finally said. "The stone knows its destiny. My hands know how to assist it. When I forget to stand in the way, watching and controlling, something unfolds that I could never force through sheer effort. I can't provide you with a method to achieve this. I can only suggest that you might already experience it at times without realizing. Pay attention to those instances. Observe what distinguishes them. You will discover that a part of you is absent in a certain manner, the part that observes, judges, and strives. Allow that aspect to rest and see what arises. Zen teaches us that we cannot compel this letting go. Any attempt to forget ourselves originates from the very self we aim to forget. However, we can foster conditions where forgetting becomes more likely. We can recognize when we are fragmenting ourselves and gently return to full engagement. We can relinquish the pursuit of specific outcomes and immerse ourselves in the activity at hand. Both Kira and Hiro uncovered this truth through different journeys. One learned to immerse himself entirely in the music. The other was emptied by sorrow until there was no observer remaining. Both discovered that their greatest work, their most authentic expression, emerged when they stepped aside. This is the art of letting go. Not a loss, but a liberation. Not emptiness, but completeness. When the self that observes and judges recedes, what remains is not nothing. What remains is life flowing effortlessly, doing what it has always known how to do. Take a gentle breath now. Feel yourself resting in this moment. Notice if there is a part of you observing your own rest, commenting on how it unfolds. And if there is, let that be acceptable as well. Simply observe and redirect your focus to the breath itself, the uncomplicated sensation of air moving, this moment occurring spontaneously without anyone needing to oversee it. Zen masters have long regarded water as one of the profound teachers of no mind. The Buddha himself utilized water in many teachings, illustrating how it mirrors the nature of reality and the path to liberation. Water does not struggle. It does not strategize its course or fret over barriers. It simply flows, responding to whatever it encounters with a kind of effortless wisdom. When water meets a rock, it does not pause to deliberate on a solution. It does not grow angry at the impediment or anxious about finding a way around. It simply moves. It flows over, around, or beneath. It discovers the path of least resistance without calculating that route. This is not passivity. Water possesses immense power. It carves canyons through solid rock. It shapes mountains over time, but its force arises not from aggression or struggle. It comes from perseverance and adaptability, from moving with circumstances rather than against them. Zen teaches that the mind can be like water. When thoughts arise, we do not need to battle them or dismiss them. We can allow them to flow through like water navigating around stones. When challenges emerge in our lives, we need not confront them with rigid opposition. We can respond fluidly, discovering the path that unfolds naturally before us. This is neither weakness nor surrender. It is a different kind of fortitude, the strength of yielding, the power of non-resistance. The Taking, an ancient text that greatly influenced Zen Buddhism, states that nothing in the world is softer than water, yet nothing excels at overcoming the hard and rigid. This teaching unveils a profound truth. What appears weak is often strong. What seems passive is often potent. The mind that flows like water accomplishes what the rigid, forceful mind cannot. When we observe water, we see no mind in action, no hesitation, no calculation, no second guessing, just a continuous, appropriate response to whatever is present. This is what becomes achievable when we cease overthinking and allow our innate intelligence to guide us. Let us delve into a story that illustrates this truth. High in the mountains, where the air was thin and cold, lived a young nun named Emmy. She had sought refuge in a remote monastery, yearning for peace. Her mind had always been busy, restless, filled with thoughts that whirled and tangled like threads in a tempest. Even as a child, she lay awake at night while her thoughts raced. Even in the quietest moments, her mind was incessantly chattering, commenting, worrying, planning, remembering. She hoped that the tranquility of the mountains and the discipline of monastic life would provide the stillness she desired. Surely, she thought, if she distanced herself from the noisy world, if she committed to meditation and simple living, her mind would finally find calm. However, the stillness eluded her. Even in this serene environment, surrounded by silence and snow, her mind persisted in its relentless churn. During meditation, a torrent of thoughts surged forth. One idea triggered another, forming an unending chain that drew her away from her breath, from the now, into a whirlwind of memories, dreams, and anxieties. While working, her thoughts strayed to worries about whether she was performing her tasks correctly, if the other nuns judged her, and if she would ever discover what she was truly seeking. At mealtimes, she hardly registered the taste of her food, so consumed was she by her thoughts. The other nuns appeared serene. They navigated their days with such grace that Emmy couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Observing them, she questioned her own state. Why could she not still her mind? Why did tranquility seem so distant despite her best efforts? Perhaps they held a secret they hadn't confided in her, or maybe they were simply born with quieter minds. Or perhaps she was inherently flawed in a way that was beyond remedy. She made renewed efforts. Emmy spent longer hours in meditation, determined to force her mind into stillness. With fierce focus, she attempted to dismiss each thought as it arose. Yet, this approach only exacerbated her turmoil. The more she battled her thoughts, the more they multiplied. The harder she sought peace, the more restless she became. It was akin to trying to capture water by slapping it with her hands. Each attempt only stirred up more chaos. One spring afternoon, as the snow began to recede, Emmy strolled alone through the woods surrounding the monastery. She felt drained and disheartened. Perhaps this path wasn't meant for her. Maybe some individuals were simply destined to have busy minds, and nothing could alter that fate. She arrived at a spot where a mountain stream gushed over stones and fallen branches. The water was crisp and clear, nourished by melting snow from the higher elevations. Emmy perched on a rock and observed the stream aimlessly. She was too weary to meditate or engage in practice. She simply sat at a. The water flowed past her without pause or hesitation. When it encountered a boulder, it divided and navigated around it. When it came across a fallen limb, it either flowed over or slipped beneath, always finding a way forward. There was no struggle in its passage, no exertion, just a seamless flow, moment after moment, adapting to whatever lay in its path. Emmy watched for a long time. She recognized that the water never resisted the obstacles it faced. It did not push against the rocks nor attempt to move them. It merely accepted their existence and sought an alternative route. Yet, she understood that in time, this gentle water would smooth the rock. It would carve channels through solid stone, not through force but through persistence, through flowing. A thought entered her mind, and for once, she did not resist it. She allowed it to surface and exist. Then, without any effort to push it away, it drifted by like a leaf on the stream. It appeared, moved through, and vanished. Another thought came into view. She observed it in the same manner, neither clinging nor resisting, simply watching it arise and fade. The thought did not require her intervention. It flowed of its own accord. Something began to transform within Emmy. She had viewed her thoughts as adversaries to overcome. She had been battling them, trying to dam the flow of her mind. But one cannot halt a stream by erecting a barrier against it. The water simply rises and finds another path, and the struggle exhausts you. What if thoughts were akin to the water itself? What if they were meant to flow freely? What if her role was not to obstruct them but to cease interfering with their natural course? What if true peace was not the absence of thoughts, but a different relationship with them? She lingered by the stream until the sun dipped low, casting hues of pink and gold upon the snow-capped peaks. The water continued to flow. It had always flowed and would keep flowing long after she was gone. This flow posed no problem to be addressed. It was merely the nature of water. Perhaps her mind was the same, not broken, just flowing. Then she made her way back to the monastery, feeling a shift within her, not the forced tranquility she had attempted to cultivate, but something more organic, akin to the stream itself. Her thoughts remained, yet she was no longer in conflict with them. In the ensuing days, Emmy began to alter her practice. When she sat in meditation, she refrained from trying to suppress her thoughts. She allowed them to come and go. She observed them arise and pass like water winding around stones. Whenever she caught herself in a struggle, attempting to dam the flow, she would recall the mountain creek. She would soften and allow the water to flow. It was a challenge. Years of habit urged her to control, to wrestle, to impose stillness. But gradually, a change occurred. The thoughts continued to emerge, yet they no longer disturbed her as before. They were simply water flowing, the natural movement of the mind. When she ceased fighting them, they lost their power to unsettle her. One evening, the abbot of the monastery inquired about Emmy's progress. "I've ceased trying to empty my mind," she replied. "I've learned to let it flow." The abbot smiled. "And what led you to this realization?" "A stream in the forest. It taught me that water doesn't battle the rocks in its path. It flows around them. My thoughts are like those rocks. For years, I've tried to eliminate them. Now, I'm learning to be the water that simply moves forward." The abbot nodded thoughtfully. This understanding is significant. Many practitioners spend years battling their own minds, unaware that the struggle itself is the issue. They think that with enough effort, they can conquer the mind and attain stillness. But the mind is not an enemy to be vanquished. It's not a wild creature to be subdued by force. He paused, gazing out at the snow-clad mountains. The mind resembles water more than anything else. It is meant to flow. Thoughts naturally arise. They are not failures of meditation. They are not indicators of doing something wrong. They are simply the nature of the mind, just as flowing is the nature of water. When we stop viewing them as hindrances and allow them to flow through us, we discover the peace we've been seeking all along. It's not a stagnant stillness, but a dynamic peace, one that moves and flows yet remains undisturbed at its core. Emmy continued her practice at the monastery for many years. Her mind never became entirely silent. Reflections arose as reflections often do, yet she had cultivated the ability to be like water, to navigate around what presented itself rather than resisting it, to approach each moment with adaptability instead of stubbornness. This was not the creation she had envisioned initially, not a void of stillness devoid of motion. It was a distinct form of tranquility, a dynamic tranquility, a tranquility that embraced motion rather than contending with it. When young monks approached her later, grappling with their restless thoughts as she once had, she would guide them to the stream in the woods. Initially, she would say nothing. She would simply have them sit and observe the water. "What do you perceive?" she would inquire after some time. Typically, if they remained seated long enough, they would begin to understand what she had realized. That water does not resist. That flow is inherent. That the serenity they sought was not about halting the stream, but about learning to move harmoniously with it. This narrative illustrates one aspect of water mind. Emmy's distress stemmed not from her thoughts themselves, but from her struggle against them. When she learned to let them drift, to cease the fight and start allowing, she discovered the peace that her struggle had made unattainable. Zen teaches that resistance breeds suffering. When we push against reality, we tire ourselves in a conflict we cannot win. The thoughts keep coming. The challenges keep emerging. Life continues to present us with situations we did not choose. If we confront all of this with rigid opposition, we shatter. However, if we learn to flow, to yield, to adapt to what arises instead of against it, we uncover a strength we were unaware we possessed. This does not imply that we become passive or that we accept everything uncritically. Water has direction. It moves toward the sea. It possesses power and intent, yet it achieves that intent through flexibility rather than force, through adaptation rather than inflexibility. Let us delve into another tale that unveils more of this teaching. In a farming valley reliant on the meticulous management of water, there resided a man named Nuru who tended a small piece of land. His fields were situated at the valley's edge where irrigation posed the greatest challenge. Water had to be carefully directed through channels and gates to nourish his crops. It was a continual effort, and Noru had done so all his life, just as his father had before him. But then came a dry season. The rains failed to fall as they typically did. The river that nourished the valley flowed lower than anyone could recall. Water that had always been adequate became limited. The farmers in the valley center, whose fields were closest to the main channels, continued to receive enough water. But those on the outskirts, like Noru, began to witness their crops wither. Noru observed his fields with mounting despair. He had a family to nourish, a wife who toiled as hard as he did, 2 children who were growing rapidly and always hungry. Without a harvest, they would face a bleak winter. They might have to borrow from relatives. If relatives had anything to spare, they might be forced to abandon the land his family had cultivated for generations. He began to work frantically, attempting to compel more water to his land. He dug his channels deeper, carving into the hard earth until his hands blistered and bled. He constructed higher walls to trap every drop. He rose before dawn and labored until after dark, struggling to make the water flow where he needed it. He scarcely ate. He hardly spoke to his family. All his energy was consumed by the battle with the water. Yet the water did not comply. It flowed where it desired. His deeper channels cracked and leaked into the dry ground. The earth was not meant to endure such deep cuts, and it resisted his insistence. His walls collapsed because he had hastily built them without a solid foundation. The harder he fought, the less he achieved. It was as if the water and the earth had united against him. Exhaustion took hold. His body ached in ways it never had before. His mind revolved with worry and frustration, running through the same desperate calculations repeatedly. He became irritable with his wife and children, snapping at them over trivial matters, unable to articulate the fear that fueled his anger. Sleep eluded him, and when it did come, he dreamt of barren fields and hungry faces looking to him for help he could not provide. One evening, too weary to work any longer but too restless to relax, Noru walked to the edge of his property where an elderly neighbor named Senzo tended his own small plot. Senzo was even older than Noru's father had been at the time of his passing. He had farmed this challenging land for over 6 decades. To Noboru's astonishment, Senzo's fields appeared healthier than his own. Not lush, not overflowing, but alive. The crops were smaller than usual, yet they were surviving. There was water in Senzo's channels, enough to keep his plants thriving. How? Noru asked, his voice rough with fatigue and something resembling desperation. How do your fields have water when mine are drying up? I have exerted twice the effort this year compared to any prior year. I have done everything I can conceive, and still my crops perish while yours endure. Senzo sat on a wooden bench outside his modest home, observing the evening light dimming over the mountains. He motioned for Nu to join him. You are attempting to coerce the water to comply with your desires. But water does not respond to coercion. It responds to invitation. Noboru failed to comprehend. I am merely trying to direct water to my fields. The same thing you are doing. Senzo shook his head slowly. Not the same thing. Come, I will demonstrate. Despite his fatigue, Noboru followed the elder to his fields. The light was waning, but he could still discern the channels that directed water to Senzo's crops. They differed from his own. His channels were deep and straight, carved with hard labor into the resistant soil. Senzo's channels were shallow and winding. They conformed to the natural contours of the land, bending where the ground desired them to bend, sloping where the earth already sloped. You dig deep channels because you believe deeper will hold more water, Senzo clarified. But deep channels oppose the earth. They crack, they leak, and they compel the water to go where it does not wish to flow. I excavate shallow channels that follow the path where the water already desires to flow. Less effort for me, less resistance from the earth, and the water comes willingly because I'm not forcing it. He pointed to a spot where his channel curved around a slight rise in the ground. You could have tunneled straight through that hill, but the effort would have been immense, and the water would have resisted you at every turn. Instead, I simply went around it. The water flows freely, unconcerned with taking the longer route. Noru glanced at his fields as darkness settled around him. He had battled the land throughout his life, seeing farming as a confrontation with nature, a relentless endeavor to impose his will upon a stubborn earth and water. It had never crossed his mind that there could be an alternative approach. But how can you tell where the water wishes to flow? He inquired. Senzo smiled gently. I observe. I remain attentive. The land reveals its secrets if you listen after rainfall, noticing where the puddles gather. Observe where the soil remains damp the longest. Those are the routes the water is already choosing. Collaborate with those pathways instead of resisting them. You will exert less effort and achieve greater results. In the days that followed, despite his doubts, Noru began to experiment with Senzo's advice. He ceased digging new ditches and started to observe his land. Initially, it felt like inactivity, as though he was surrendering. His entire life had taught him that hard work was the solution to every dilemma, that effort and struggle defined the line between success and failure. Sitting idly and watching felt like laziness, yet he compelled himself to follow through. He strolled through his field slowly, noticing details he had previously overlooked. The subtle dips where water pooled after even a brief rain. The slope's angle that dictated the natural movement of water. The areas where the soil was softer, absorbing water more readily. The patches where the ground was hard, causing water to simply run off. His perspective on his land began to shift. Previously, it had been a barrier to conquer, a formidable force requiring constant combat. Now, he started to see it as a living entity with its own characteristics, preferences, and inherent ways of functioning. The land was not his adversary, it was simply being itself. By grasping its nature, he could collaborate with it instead of opposing it. He began to adjust his channels, not based on his preconceived notions of where the water should flow, but guided by where the water appeared to want to go. It was a humbling process. He had to relinquish channels he had painstakingly carved over the years. He had to acknowledge that the methods of his father and grandfather might not have been the most effective. This realization was more challenging than the physical toil. It required him to accept that all his strife could have been misdirected, that he had been engaged in a battle that was unnecessary. Yet, the water responded. As he ceased fighting and embraced collaboration, more water reached his fields. Not because there was an increase in water availability, but because less was lost to resistance and leakage. By aligning with the natural flow rather than opposing it, he achieved what all his previous efforts had failed to accomplish. His crops survived that drought year. They were not plentiful, but they sufficed. His family did not go hungry. As he surveyed his fields during harvest, he felt emotions he hadn't anticipated. Gratitude, yes, but also a sense of wonder. He had achieved more by yielding than through all his years of struggle. More significant than the harvest was the lesson Nauru learned. He discovered that fighting was not always the solution. Sometimes, the path to obtaining what you need lies not in pushing harder, but in easing up, observing, listening, and identifying the route that opens naturally instead of attempting to force through a closed path. He reflected on how he had lived his entire life, perpetually struggling, battling against the land, against circumstances, against anything that deviated from his desires. He had believed this was strength. He had thought it defined what it meant to be an effective farmer, a reliable provider, a good man. Now, he recognized that all that fighting had often hindered him, that the very effort he assumed was beneficial had sometimes been the obstacle holding him back. In the years that followed, Nauru gained a reputation in the valley for his expertise in water management. Other farmers sought his guidance, particularly in dry seasons. He would accompany them through their lands, pointing out what the earth revealed, where water wanted to flow, where it was being forced against its natural course, and how to adapt to conditions rather than resist them. Water is a teacher, he would share. It demonstrates that softness can overcome hardness, that yielding can prove stronger than force. We believe we must fight to survive. Yet, often, our struggles are what prevent us from acquiring what we truly need. This narrative illustrates another facet of water wisdom. No resistance against the land improved his circumstances. Once he learned to observe, yield, and work with natural conditions rather than against them, he discovered a success that had eluded him despite all his efforts. The Buddha spoke of right effort, not too much, not too little, neither forceful nor passive. There exists a balanced approach that achieves more through alignment than through confrontation. Water exemplifies this balance. It possesses clear direction and intention, yet accomplishes its goals through adaptability rather than coercion. In our lives, we frequently find ourselves engaged in battles. We grapple with circumstances beyond our control, with emotions we wish to suppress, with the natural flow of life because we believe it should be different. This struggle drains us and often exacerbates our situation. However, when we soften, when we seek the path that opens rather than attempt to pry open a closed one, we uncover a different kind of strength. A mind that flows like water does not wrestle with each moment, trying to alter it. It responds to what is genuinely present, discerning the natural path, yielding where it is wise to yield, persisting where persistence is beneficial. This is not passivity, it is intelligence, the intelligence of water that finds its way to the sea without ever needing a map. Take a gentle breath. Now allow yourself to settle like water finding its equilibrium. There is no need to push towards anything. Nothing requires your resistance. Just this breath flowing in. This breath flowing out like water. like the natural rhythm of life itself. In Zen practice, great attention is devoted to the space between thoughts. We typically focus only on the thoughts themselves. They emerge, captivate our attention, and lead to subsequent thoughts, much like being swept along by a current. Yet, between one thought and the next lies a gap, a pause, a moment of stillness that we often pass unnoticed. The teacher of enlightenment indicated this void when he imparted wisdom about the essence of the mind. He revealed that thoughts, despite their apparent continuity, are fleeting. They emerge and dissipate, reminiscent of waves upon the sea. In the intervals between each wave, the ocean remains. In the gaps between thoughts, awareness persists. This awareness that exists prior to and between thoughts is not devoid of substance or dull. It is awake, vibrant, and present. It forms the foundation from which thoughts arise and to which they return. Zen practice frequently involves familiarizing oneself with this interval. It is not about enlarging it or clinging to it, but simply recognizing its existence. During meditation, when we sit in silence and observe the mind, we start to perceive these pauses. A thought concludes. For a brief moment, there is merely awareness, just presence before the subsequent thought emerges. This moment is perpetually accessible to us. Yet, we often overlook it, being too engrossed in the thoughts themselves. This teaching highlights something significant about the concept of no mind. No mind is neither a construct nor an accomplishment. It is what has always been present before thought commences. It represents the stillness that exists prior to mental activity. When we rest within this stillness, even for a moment, we uncover a sense of peace that does not rely on our thoughts being in a specific state. The thoughts may ebb and flow. The stillness endures. Buddhist sages have likened this to the sky and clouds. Thoughts resemble clouds drifting across the sky. At times, there are numerous clouds. At other times, few. Sometimes they are dark and oppressive, at others light and airy. However, the sky itself remains unchanged. It does not transform into the clouds. It merely accommodates them as they pass. The awareness that exists prior to thought resembles this sky. Vast, open, unaffected by whatever traverses it. Let us delve into a tale that illustrates this reality. In a village renowned for its celebrations, there lived a drum artisan named Rio. His lineage had crafted drums for countless generations. The magnificent drums that summoned villagers to festivities, the smaller drums that maintained rhythm for dances, the sacred drums reserved for temple ceremonies. Rio possessed the skills to stretch the skins, sculpt the wooden bodies, and create instruments that resonated with profound, rich tones. However, crafting a drum was merely half of the art. The other half involved its testing. Each drum departing from Rio's workshop needed to be played, listened to, and assessed as worthy or unworthy. This testing was an art form itself, a skill Rio inherited from his father, who had learned from his father before him. As a child, Rio's father imparted the fundamental technique, striking the drum center for the deeper sound, hitting near the edge for a sharper tone, listening for resonance, sustain, or any buzz or rattle that might indicate a defect. These were aspects that could be taught verbally, demonstrated, and practiced. Yet, there was something more his father endeavored to convey, something challenging to express. Rio recalled his father seated before a newly finished drum, stick raised, eyes partially closed, in a state of anticipation. Sometimes he would remain there for several long breaths before striking. The workshop would fall into complete silence. Even the birds outside seemed to hush. As a child, Rio had grown restless observing this. Why not simply strike the drum and hear the sound? What was the purpose of all this waiting? His father's stillness appeared almost sacred. He sat like a statue, stick poised in the air, breathing slow and deep. Young Rio would squirm and shift, desiring the waiting to conclude, yearning for the sound to materialize, but his father never hurried. He waited until something indicated to him that the moment was right, although Rio could never discern what that something was. "What are you waiting for?" he had once asked, unable to suppress his impatience. His father had smiled, a gentle, patient smile that Rio would carry in his memory forever. "I am listening to the drum before I play it. But it is silent." "Everything produces a sound," his father replied. "Even silence has a sound if you listen deeply enough. The drum is already singing. I am waiting until I can hear it. Only then will I know how to strike it. Then the drum will reveal its true voice." Rio had not grasped his father's meaning. He assumed his father was speaking in poetic terms, as seasoned craftsmen occasionally do, making ordinary things sound enigmatic. He mastered the practical aspects of drum making and considered himself fully trained. After his father's passing, Rio assumed control of the workshop and continued the family tradition. His drums were commendable. Customers expressed satisfaction. The instruments sold well and were played at festivals throughout the area. By any standard, Rio was a prosperous drum maker. Yet, a sense of unease lingered. When testing his drums, he would strike them and listen, strike and listen, adjusting and refining as needed. The method was adequate. Still, he recalled how his father had tested drums that prolonged stillness before the initial strike, and he pondered whether he was overlooking something. One autumn, an elderly drummer visited Rio's workshop to purchase a new instrument. His name was Master Sai, and he had been performing at the Grand Temple in the capital for over 50 years. His esteemed reputation made Rio feel both honored and anxious to serve him. Rio presented several recently completed drums. Master Sai scrutinized each one meticulously, running his aged hands over the stretched skins, feeling the wooden bodies, observing the craftsmanship with expert precision. "These are well crafted," he remarked. "Your technique is solid. Your materials are commendable. May I hear them?" Rio handed him a drumstick and stepped aside. Master Sai positioned himself before the first drum. He raised the stick and then waited. The silence extended. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 5 breaths, 10. Rio began to feel uneasy. Was something amiss? Was the old man experiencing difficulty? Master Sai's eyes were half closed. His body remained utterly still. The stick was poised, motionless. The only movement was his slow, deep breathing. Then, without any visible preparation, Without any gathering of strength, the stick fell. The drum responded. A single deep tone that seemed to fill not only the workshop but something much larger. The note lingered in the air, rich and full, before gradually fading into silence. Master Sai opened his eyes. "This is a fine drum," he stated simply. He moved to the next drum and repeated the process. The profound silence, the anticipation, followed by the effortless impact and the revealing sound. Each drum was evaluated in this manner, with the pause before each strike mirroring the stillness that followed. Once he concluded, Master Sai selected 2 drums to take home. As Rio meticulously wrapped them up, his curiosity bubbled over. "Master, may I inquire about something? When you assess a drum, you linger in silence before hitting it. My father used to do the same. He mentioned he was listening to the drum prior to playing it. I never grasped what he meant." Master Sai beamed, and within that smile, Rio recognized a reflection of his father's patient demeanor. Your father possessed great wisdom. What he expressed was accurate. The drum sings before we strike it. However, to perceive that melody, we must cultivate quietness. Our minds are often cluttered with noise, hindering our ability to catch the subtle sounds. We preoccupy ourselves with how we will hit the drum, what tone we anticipate, whether the drum is of quality. This mental chatter can create a form of deafness. He gently touched the surface of one drum. When I approach a drum, the first step is calming my mind. I do not focus on the drum, nor do I anticipate the sound. I simply remain present, attuned to what is already there. In that silence before any thought emerges, I find a clarity that is both sharp and sensitive. From that tranquility, I can hear things that thought cannot perceive. What do you hear? Hiu inquired. The drum itself, its essence, its voice yearning to surface. When I strike from that tranquil state, I am not imposing my expectations on the drum sound. I am inviting it to express itself. The quality of my focus prior to the strike influences the sound produced. If I strike amidst scattered thoughts, the tone is disjointed. If I strike from stillness, the tone resonates clearly. Rio pondered this for a moment. Is that why you take your time before each strike? You seek that quietness. Yes. Yet with practice, stillness can arrive more swiftly. It's not about duration, it's about the depth of focus. Some days, the mind settles easily. Other days, it requires more time. I wait until I sense that clarity, that presence before thought. Then I strike. After Master Sai departed with his drums, Rio found himself alone in his workshop. A completed drum rested on its stand before him. He had previously tested this drum using the quick, practical method he refined over the years. It was a fine drum, and he was familiar with its sound. But now, he wanted to explore something new. He lifted the stick, preparing to strike. Then he hesitated. His mind was already cluttered, brimming with anticipation, expectations of what he should hear, and concerns about whether he could replicate Master Segei's teachings. He lowered the stick and closed his eyes. He made an effort to quiet his mind. Thoughts flooded in, doubts, questions, memories of his father, self-judgments. The mind seemed intent on filling each moment with noise. Rio didn't resist. He had learned from crafting drums that you cannot force a skin to stretch correctly. It requires gentle, patient work. Perhaps the mind was similar. He sat and breathed. Thoughts arose, and he allowed them to drift by. Gradually, the spaces between thoughts lengthened. He began to perceive the gaps, the pauses, the moments of pure presence before the next thought surfaced. And within one of those pauses, he sensed something, not exactly with his ears. It was subtler, a feeling of the drum before him, a recognition of its presence, its anticipation, its readiness to express itself. Without intention, without thought, his arm moved. The stick made contact. The tone that resonated was unlike what he had heard before during his testing of the drum. It felt fuller, rounder, more vibrant, as though the drum had finally been given the freedom to truly sing. Rio opened his eyes, gazing at the drum in awe. It was the same instrument he had evaluated countless times, yet the sound was transformed. This difference emanated from him, from the stillness preceding the strike, from listening before hearing, from presence before thought. He attempted again. This time, the tranquility came more readily. The interval between thoughts widened, and in that space, he found the same clear presence. The subsequent strike produced another exquisite tone. Not identical to the first, each strike was distinct, yet all carried the same vibrant quality. Rio chuckled softly to himself in the empty workshop. For years, he had believed he understood his craft. He thought his father's enigmatic waiting was merely an elderly man's habit, a quirk to respect but not comprehend. Now he realized that his father had tried to impart the most crucial lesson of all, not just how to create drums, but how to connect with them, how to be present before taking action, how to allow stillness to give rise to sound. In the years that followed, Rio's drums gained a reputation for an elusive quality. People remarked that they sang more freely than others, that they seemed to possess their own voices. Some attributed this to his exceptional craftsmanship, which was indeed remarkable. However, Rio understood that the true secret was simpler and more profound. He had learned to hear the drum before playing it. He had learned to rest in the stillness preceding thought. And from that stillness, something could unfold that his analytical mind could never have concocted. When people inquired about the secret to his craft, he found it challenging to articulate. "I wait," he would say. "I listen to what is already present. The drum communicates when it is ready." Most people did not grasp this. They assumed he was being modest or evasive, but Rio recognized it as a straightforward truth. The quality that rendered his drums extraordinary did not originate from him. It flowed through him from a place existing beyond thought, a stillness that had always been there, waiting for him to uncover it. This narrative illustrates something subtle about the space preceding thought. Rio realized that the quality of attention he brought to the moment before action shaped the action itself. When he struck from scattered thoughts, the outcome was mundane. When he struck from stillness, something remarkable emerged. Zen teaches that this stillness is eternally accessible to us. It is not something we manufacture. It is what is inherently present when we cease adding the noise of thought. In that stillness lies a kind of knowing that is more immediate than thought, a responsiveness that does not require deliberation. This encapsulates the essence of no mind. The tale of the tea master. In a city renowned for its tea culture, there resided a tea master named Kanu, whose fame had spread far and wide. Visitors from distant lands traveled to partake in her tea ceremonies, drawn by an indescribable quality in her movements that transformed the ordinary act of tea making into an extraordinary experience. Kanu was not always so distinguished. In her youth, she had studied the tea ceremony like many aspiring practitioners. She mastered the correct postures, the appropriate sequences, and the established rituals. Her technique was flawless, yet many tea artisans shared this precision. While skilled, she was not extraordinary. The turning point in her life came after she experienced profound loss. Her mentor, a wise woman who had been her guide for 2 decades, suddenly passed away. One moment she was there, her keen eyes and warmth offering guidance on Kanu's posture and the angle of the tea scoop. The next day, she was gone. A stroke in the night, they said. She had not endured. She had simply ceased to exist. Kanu was heartbroken. Her mentor was more than just a teacher. She was like a second mother, a steadfast presence throughout Kanu's formative years. The sorrow was immense. For many months, Kanu could not bring herself to practice. The tea room was a painful reminder of her mentor's absence. She could still envision the old woman kneeling there, could still hear her voice explaining the significance of each movement. Without her teacher's presence, the familiar rituals felt empty. During this period of mourning, Kanu spent countless hours in quiet reflection, neither practicing nor contemplating tea, just being with her grief, allowing it to flow through her like weather sweeping through a valley. She lacked the energy for anything more, no drive to achieve, improve, or even to feel better. She simply sat, breathed, and let her sorrow exist as it was. As the months of silence passed, something began to change, though Kanu did not notice it initially. Her mind, weary from grief, started to quiet in ways it never had during her years of dedicated practice. Without striving to meditate or adhering to any technique, she found herself in long periods of simple awareness. Thoughts became less frequent. When they did arise, they dissipated more swiftly, and the silence between them deepened. One morning, without intention, she entered the tea room. She did not consciously decide to prepare tea. Her hands began to move instinctively, guided by the form she had internalized. From a distance, she observed her body performing the ceremony. There was a notable difference. The movements flowed effortlessly, without hesitation or contemplation about the next step. Her body transitioned seamlessly from stillness to action and back to stillness, much like the rhythm of breathing. Once the ceremony concluded, Kanu remained seated in the tranquil room, trying to comprehend her experience. Her mind had been devoid of thought, free from planning, exertion, or self-observation. Only the movement existed, emerging from a place beyond thought. She started to delve into this revelation. She discovered that when she began a ceremony with quietude, allowing her mind to settle, the subsequent movements possessed a unique quality. They seemed to manifest on their own, without her conscious direction. The tea was brewed, and the guests were served flawlessly, yet she felt no sense of ownership over the actions. There was merely the act of doing. Students began to perceive the transformation in her practice. They couldn't pinpoint what had changed. The forms remained unchanged, the sequence intact, yet something was different. As they observed Kainu prepare tea, they felt they were witnessing a natural phenomenon, akin to water flowing down a slope or flowers unfurling under sunlight. One student, a young woman named Mushin, boldly inquired, "Your movements appear to have no starting point. They just occur. How is this possible? When I perform the ceremony, I'm always preoccupied with the next step. My movements feel disjointed, like beads strung on a thread. Yours flow as a single, cohesive stream. What is your secret?" Kainu contemplated the question deeply. Articulating her discovery was not straightforward. "When I first sit down to prepare tea," she explained, "I do nothing. I allow my mind to remain empty and let the stillness deepen. I am not thinking about the ceremony or planning my initial movement. I am simply present, aware, resting in the silence before everything begins." She paused, searching for the right expression. In that stillness, there's a sense of readiness, like a calm pool of water waiting for a single drop to create ripples. When that readiness reaches its peak, movement begins naturally. I don't choose to move. It simply emerges from the stillness, much like a breath arises when we stop holding our lungs. Mushin appeared confused. "But how can you move without making a conscious decision to do so?" "The decision occurs, but it takes place beneath the realm of thought. Our bodies possess the ability to perform many actions without our minds dictating each motion. When you walk, do you consciously decide to lift each foot? When you speak, do you plan the position of your tongue for every sound? There exists an intelligence that operates prior to and beneath our conscious thinking. By sitting in stillness before the ceremony, I allow that deeper intelligence to guide my movements. My thinking mind recedes, and something else takes charge." She lifted the tea bowl, cradling it gently in her hands. "The ceremony has been practiced for centuries. Its forms reside in my body, my hands, my bones. They do not require my thoughts to instruct them. When I rest in stillness, the ceremony unfolds through me. I am not the one executing it. I am simply present while it occurs." Mushin began to adopt this approach in her practice. Initially, it was frustrating. When she attempted to clear her mind before the ceremony, her thoughts only grew louder, multiplying as if they were offended by her effort to silence them. She found herself questioning whether she was sitting properly, worrying if she would ever grasp Kainu's meaning. She judged herself for having so many thoughts, feeling as if she was failing, unable to find the stillness Kainu described. She considered giving up, convinced that perhaps some individuals were naturally inclined toward this type of practice while others were not. Maybe her mind was simply too restless. Yet Kainu encouraged her to persevere. The essence of being. Do not attempt to clear your mind entirely. That only creates more tension, as it introduces an additional thought, the notion that you should have no thoughts at all. It's akin to trying to calm water by forcing it down. Instead, simply sit. Allow thoughts to come and go naturally. Don't pursue them, nor should you try to push them away. They are merely clouds drifting by. You are the sky. With time, your mind will find its own calm. You can't compel a pond to become tranquil. You merely cease to agitate it and wait. Weeks went by as Mushin practiced the art of stillness before each ceremony. Initially, it felt as if nothing was altering, but gradually, so subtly that she hardly noticed, a transformation occurred. She began to recognize the spaces between her thoughts, brief instances of pure presence before the next thought emerged. These gaps had always existed, yet she had overlooked them. Now, she learned to inhabit these spaces, not clinging to them but allowing them to be. One day, during a ceremonial practice, a change took place. Mushin had been immersed in stillness, and when it was time to commence, she didn't make a conscious decision to move. Her hands simply began to act. The motions originated from a place she could not identify. For the first time, she grasped the essence of what Kainu had been elucidating. The ceremony that ensued wasn't flawless. There were instances when her analytical mind attempted to regain control, moments when she lost the rhythm and had to rediscover it. Yet, she had tasted something novel. She had felt movement emerging from stillness, actions born from the silence preceding thought. After the ceremony, Mushin sat in quiet reflection, absorbing the experience. Kainu offered her a knowing smile. You caught it, but only fleetingly. It slipped away too quickly. That's how it begins, moments of flow. Then the mind intervenes. We find our center again, and the flow returns. With dedication, these moments can extend. However, even seasoned practitioners can lose the flow. Sometimes, the practice isn't about achieving everlasting stillness. It's about continually returning to it, resting in the silence that exists before thought and allowing actions to rise from that deep well. Zen teaches that this space prior to thought is not devoid of essence. It holds a different kind of presence, an awareness complete without the need for thoughts. When we learn to be at ease in this awareness, even momentarily, we realize that actions can emerge without the usual cognitive processes of planning and decision-making. Movement cascades from stillness. Reactions emerge spontaneously. This is a state of no mind in motion. The Buddha imparted that suffering arises from our attachment to thoughts, identities, and the incessant mental commentary surrounding our experiences. Yet before this commentary begins, there exists pure experience itself, awareness encountering the present moment. When we engage with this directly, even for a fleeting second, a sense of relaxation envelops us. We recognize we don't need to navigate each moment through thought. Life can unfold through us when we step aside. Take a gentle breath. Now, observe the brief pause at the end of your exhale before the next inhale starts. That minuscule moment of stillness. Rest there for a beat. There is nothing to solve, nothing to accomplish. Just this stillness from which the next breath will naturally emerge. Together, we have journeyed through various facets of no mind. Tonight, we have witnessed how a weary mind finds rest by ceasing its internal conflict. We have felt the wisdom residing in the body beneath thought. We have seen what transpires when we let go of self and permit actions to flow unhindered. We have learned from water how to yield instead of resist. We have encountered the stillness that exists prior to thought arising. Now we delve into the essence of this teaching, which is remarkably straightforward. No mind is not a distant goal. It is not a state exclusive to monks who meditate for years in mountain retreats. It is not something to be attained through struggle or a source of inadequacy. No mind is simply what remains when we cease to fragment ourselves. It is the inherent tranquility of being whole. Zen teaches that what we seek is already within our grasp. The Buddha nature, the awakened mind, is not something we need to create or earn. It is already here, present, and part of who we are. Our thoughts obscure it. Our striving distances us from it. Our belief that we must transform into something else hinders our recognition of what we have always been. The teaching of no mind guides us back home, not to a singular place, but to this moment precisely as it is. Not to an extraordinary state of consciousness, but to the simple awareness reading these words, breathing this breath, resting here right now. When we cease to strive to be elsewhere, we find that we are already here. When we stop trying to be someone other than ourselves, we realize we are already who we are. When we refrain from adding the clamor of thought to the silence of existence, we uncover a peace that has been awaiting us all along. Buddhist masters often speak of the ordinary mind as the path itself, not the mind that has been meticulously trained, purified, or elevated. Not the mind that has attained rare states of consciousness or amassed extraordinary experiences. Just this mind, the mind that perceives the changing light as dusk approaches, the mind that senses the weight of a blanket, the mind that hears distant sounds and allows them to pass by, the mind that is aware of awareness without the need to embellish that awareness. This ordinary awareness, when we stop complicating it with our desires and efforts, is the peace we have been searching for. We have scoured far and wide for something that has never left us. We have tried to become what we inherently are. The journey home is not about distance but about recognition, seeing what has been here all along. Let us delve into a story that illustrates this truth. In a serene village where the streets were illuminated each evening by oil lamps, there lived an elderly lamplighter named Cho. Each day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he would take his long pole with its small flame and walk his daily rounds through the town. One by one, he would reach up to ignite the lamps that adorned every corner, crossroads, and stretch of dark street. He had performed this duty for 4 decades. As a young man, he inherited this role from his father, who had brightened these same streets for 30 years prior. Back then, it seemed like a modest job, almost a source of embarrassment. Other young men became merchants who traveled to far-flung cities, or craftsmen whose creations were displayed and celebrated. They evolved into learned individuals who garnered respect for their knowledge. There was no glory in this, no riches to acquire, no career advancement to aspire to, merely the routine act of dispelling darkness through light, repeated every night throughout his life. His father had attempted to impart wisdom about the craft, something beyond the basic mechanics of flame and oil. Yet, in his youth, Cho had been too eager, too restless, too yearning for something grander than the simple act of lighting lamps. He hadn't paid close attention. He believed his father was merely accepting a modest life, seeking significance where none seemed to exist. In his early years, Cho had often felt resentment. He would ignite the lamps while dreaming of distant places, of alternate lives he could have lived. He pondered what he might have achieved had circumstances been different. He fretted over finances, esteem, and whether anyone acknowledged his presence. He envisioned escapes that never materialized and longed for recognition that remained elusive. His body traversed familiar streets, while his thoughts resided elsewhere, perpetually elsewhere. Yet, at some point along the journey, without a pivotal moment of revelation, something shifted within him. Cho couldn't pinpoint when it occurred. There wasn't a particular evening he could identify as the moment he truly awakened. The transformation had been gradual, akin to the slow progression of seasons. He simply began to observe. Initially, it was merely the small details. The way the flame of his torch danced in the wind, the unique quality of light at dusk, different each night depending on the clouds and the season, the sounds of the town settling into night, doors shutting, voices summoning children home, the aroma of cooking fires and evening meals. Gradually, his focus sharpened. He started to appreciate the act of lighting itself. The instant his flame touched the wick, the brief catch, the pause, then the burst of illumination. Each lamp possessed its own character. Some ignited swiftly, while others demanded patience. Some glowed brightly, while others emitted a gentle light. He became familiar with each lamp along his route, much like a gardener understands every plant. Then something else transpired, something more challenging to articulate. The distinction between Cho and his labor began to fade. He no longer perceived himself as an individual performing a task. There was only the walking, the reaching up, the lighting, the light cascading through the darkness, one lamp after another. During these evening rounds, his mind quieted. Not empty, not void, but tranquil. Thoughts would surface occasionally, yet they didn't distract him as they once had. He acknowledged them as he would notice birds soaring overhead, present for a moment, then gone. His focus remained on the task at hand, on the walking, on the lights blooming one after another. The townspeople started to observe something different about Cho. They couldn't articulate precisely what it was. He had always been kind. He had always performed his duties competently. Yet now, there was an unmistakable quality in his demeanor, a stillness, a tranquility that radiated from him like warmth from a fire. Children would sometimes accompany him on his evening rounds, watching as he lit the lamps. He never shooed them away. He would smile and continue his work, allowing them to partake in the serene ritual. They seemed to sense something extraordinary about it, though they couldn't quite express it. One evening, a traveler in the town, a scholar who had studied at esteemed monasteries, happened to be out walking when Cho passed by on his rounds. The scholar paused, captivated by the old lamplighter's actions. Something in the way Cho moved captured his attention. The unhurried rhythm, the profound immersion, the absence of any restlessness or distraction. After Cho had ignited several lamps, the scholar approached him. "Pardon me," he said. "I have spent many years studying meditation and seeking tranquility. I have sat in silence for months at a time and have learned from esteemed masters. But watching you just now, I experienced something I seldom feel, a quality of presence that my practice has not afforded me. May I inquire about your secret?" Cho regarded the scholar with gentle, puzzled eyes. "I possess no secret," he replied. "I simply light lamps. But there's something unique in the manner you do it. A stillness, a completeness, as if you are wholly present, not wishing to be elsewhere, not contemplating anything else. I have pursued this state through various techniques. How did you attain it?" Cho contemplated the question thoughtfully. Speaking about such matters was unfamiliar to him. He was a lamplighter, not a mentor. "I'm unsure if I can articulate it," he replied slowly. "In my youth, my mind was perpetually elsewhere. I would light lamps while preoccupied with other thoughts. The work was merely a physical action while my mind drifted. I was fragmented, part of me here and part of me away." He reached up and lit another lamp. The flame ignited and spread its comforting glow. However, over many years, something transformed. I ceased desiring to be elsewhere. I no longer viewed lighting as just a task to complete before moving on to other things. I allowed myself to be fully present, right here, with the flame, the lamp, the walking, as evening approached. He turned to face the scholar directly. "I am not thinking about lighting lamps. I am not contemplating anything. There is only this, the flame, the wick, the darkness turning into light. Where else could my mind be? This is my life, this moment, walking this street, lighting this lamp. Why would I wish to be anywhere else?" The scholar fell silent for a long moment. He had received numerous intricate teachings about emptiness, the concept of no self, and the nature of the mind. He had practiced many sophisticated techniques and engaged in debates with other scholars regarding the nuances of various Buddhist schools. He had amassed knowledge and experiences he believed would lead him to tranquility. Yet, this elderly lamplighter, devoid of formal training and philosophical concepts, had revealed to him something simpler, something his studies had obscured rather than illuminated. All his searching had been directed toward the wrong goal. He had sought something extraordinary, something beyond the mundane. Yet this old man had discovered peace not through transcending ordinary life, but by being fully engaged with it. "You are not fragmented," the scholar finally said. "You are whole. That is what I perceived, not a unique state of consciousness, not a remarkable accomplishment. A person fully engaged in the present, performing their task without distraction from wandering thoughts." Cho nodded, though the scholar's words were not entirely clear to him. "I just light lamps," he reiterated. "But yes, I'm here while doing it. Where else would I be?" The scholar bowed deeply, like one would to a revered teacher. In that instant, he realized that wisdom can manifest in unexpected ways. It doesn't require titles or elaborate garments. Sometimes, an elderly man with a lamppost possesses more understanding of tranquility than all the scholars in every monastery. The scholar expressed his gratitude and observed as Cho continued his work, moving from lamp to lamp as twilight deepened. Each light blossomed in succession. The shadows eased. The town readied itself for slumber, and the old man ambled on, serene, whole, simply doing what lay before him, simply being where he was, simply a home. This narrative illustrates the essence of a clear mind. Cho had no specialized training. He didn't engage in meditation or receive teachings from masters. Over many years, he simply ceased to feel divided. He stopped yearning to be anywhere other than the present. He allowed himself to be completely present in his modest task. In that completeness, he discovered a tranquility that eluded even the most diligent scholars. Zen philosophy teaches that enlightenment isn't complex. We complicate it with our relentless searching, our striving, our various techniques and ideologies. At its core, it is simply this: being here entirely, without division, engaging fully in what we are doing without wishing to do something else, embracing this moment as it is without requiring it to change. This doesn't imply that we should never think or plan or reflect. Thinking has its rightful place. However, we don't need to be incessantly lost in thought. We can return to our actual location. We can be whole. Let's delve into another story as we settle in together. In a monastery nestled within the mountains, there was a gardener named Sen who had cared for the temple grounds for over 3 decades. She arrived at the monastery as a young woman, restless and seeking. She yearned for enlightenment, to reach a profound understanding, to attain wisdom and freedom. In those early years, she practiced meditation with unwavering determination. She immersed herself in the teachings, memorizing sutras and commentaries, probing teachers about intricate doctrinal points. She sought out the most esteemed masters, pleading for their guidance. She undertook challenging practices, fasted, and maintained silence for extended periods. Enlightenment, she believed, was a goal to be reached through hard work and commitment. No one could claim she lacked either. Yet, enlightenment eluded her. Regardless of her efforts, the countless hours spent in meditation, or the teaching she absorbed, the breakthrough she longed for remained elusive. Occasionally, during meditation, she would catch glimpses of something significant, but they always slipped away. She would convince herself that she was close, that the next retreat, practice, or teaching would finally lead her to lasting awakening. But it never materialized. She observed other practitioners around her, some of whom seemed to have achieved what she sought. They exuded a sense of ease that she could not access, a tranquility her striving failed to produce. She questioned her sincerity, dedication, and intellect. Why couldn't she grasp what others seemed to have attained? After many years of relentless pursuit, Sen became weary. Her quest had drained her. The intensity she had sustained for so long was no longer tenable. Her body ached from prolonged sitting. Her mind felt dull from the relentless effort. She had poured everything into her quest, yet all she had to show for it was exhaustion. She asked the abbess if she could be excused from the meditation schedule and assigned simpler tasks instead. Anticipating resistance, she expected the abbess to urge her to persevere through her fatigue. Instead, the abbess gazed at her thoughtfully for a moment before nodding. "Go tend the gardens," she instructed. "Perhaps what you seek will find you there." Sen was assigned to care for the temple grounds. Initially, she felt like a failure. Having sought enlightenment, she found herself pulling weeds. She had aspired to wisdom only to be hauling water and trimming bushes. It seemed like a defeat. Yet, As seasons changed and she immersed herself in the straightforward tasks, something unexpected unfolded. She ceased to ponder enlightenment. There was no space for lofty spiritual pursuits while kneeling in the dirt, removing weeds one by one. There was no room for philosophy while transporting water to parched plants or raking leaves from the paths. Her body was too engaged, her focus too occupied to allow her mind to drift into its habitual realms of ambition and self-criticism. Her world became small and immediate. This plant, this stone, this patch of earth, the sensation of soil between her fingers, cool and alive, the aroma of greenery after rain, the way light shifted through the leaves with the seasons, the simple joy of witnessing a plant she nurtured begin to flourish, the rhythm of work and rest, effort and ease. Initially, she resisted this simplicity. She convinced herself she was merely recuperating, preparing to return to her true practice. But weeks turned into months, and months into years, and she found herself increasingly disinterested in returning to the meditation hall. The garden had transformed into her practice. The uncomplicated acts of tending had become her path. In that simplicity, that immediacy, Sen began to discover what her extensive searching had not provided. Not enlightenment as she had envisioned. Not a dramatic breakthrough or mystical experience, but a quiet settling, a peace that arose from being completely present with simple things. She no longer pondered her spiritual progress. She no longer compared herself to others or evaluated her own growth. She merely worked in the garden. Hands in the soil, sun warming her back, water nourishing roots that required it. Young monks occasionally came to observe her toil. They observed something unique about her movements, something deliberate, something fulfilling. They would pose questions regarding her practice, anticipating elaborate responses. "How do you achieve tranquility?" They would inquire. "I pull weeds," she would reply. "I tend to plants. My hands are in the earth. Where else would my mind reside? But don't you pursue enlightenment anymore?" Sen would smile at this query. "I pursued enlightenment for 2 decades and found nothing. Then I ceased my search and discovered something greater. I found this." She would indicate the garden surrounding her. "This moment, this breath, this labor. When I stopped searching for something extraordinary elsewhere, I realized that everyday life was sufficient. That being fully present was what I had been seeking all along." One autumn afternoon, the Adverts came to stroll with Sen through the garden. The leaves were shifting to shades of gold and crimson. The air was crisp and fragrant with ripening fruit. "I have observed you over the years," the ABB said. "When you first arrived, you resembled a clenched fist, tightly holding onto your quest. Now you are like an open palm. What has changed?" Sen reflected on the question as they walked past the ancient plum trees. "I surrendered," she said. "At last. I stopped striving to reach a destination. I ceased believing that peace was something I had to attain through effort. I simply began to do what was in front of me. And somehow, in that surrender, I found what all my striving had never provided." She paused to remove a small weed that had sprouted beside the path. "I think I was always searching elsewhere, seeking enlightenment in extraordinary experiences, in moments of revelation. in states of awareness described in texts authored by wise sages. I never considered looking here in the garden, in my hands, in the simple moments that constitute most of life. She stood slowly, her old knees protesting the motion, and surveyed the garden she had nurtured for so many years. The trees she had planted as saplings had grown tall and robust. The stones she had arranged lined the pathways in formations that felt inevitable, as if they had always belonged there. When I finally ceased looking elsewhere, I realized that here was enough, that the ordinary was sufficient, that this moment, just as it is, was what I had been seeking all along. Not some other moment, not a transformed moment. This one, the only one that truly exists. The abbots nodded slowly. This is what the ancient teachers meant when they stated that the ordinary mind is the path. Not a special mind, not a perfected mind. Just this mind, fully present, not searching elsewhere. You have discovered it, though you were not attempting to find it. Perhaps because you were not striving to seek it. Yes, Sen concurred. And that seems to be the secret, if there is one. Stop trying to find it. Stop believing it is located somewhere else. Just be here, fully and completely engaged in what you are doing. What we seek is not concealed in some far-off place. It is here. It has always been here. We only needed to stop rushing past it. They continued walking together through the garden as the afternoon light began to soften. Somewhere, a bird called out. Leaves floated down from the trees. And Sen, who had once pursued enlightenment with fierce determination, was at peace. Not because she had accomplished anything extraordinary, but because she had finally ceased striving to achieve and had simply allowed herself to be where she was. Zen teaches that what we seek is not distant. It is not hidden in secret teachings or available solely to those with exceptional talents. It is here, in this breath, in this moment, in the ordinary experience of being alive. When we stop separating ourselves between here and there, between who we are and who we think we ought to be, we discover a wholeness that was never truly lost. No, the mind is not something exotic. It is the simple experience of being undivided, of engaging in what we are doing without wishing to be doing something else, of being present without yearning to be elsewhere, of resting in this moment without needing it to be different. The lamplighter found it after 40 years of his rounds. The gardener discovered it by surrendering her search and kneeling in the earth. Both uncovered the same truth. Peace is not attained. It is permitted. It is what remains when we cease complicating our lives with endless seeking and striving. It is what we discover when we finally return to where we already are. All the teachings we have explored tonight point to this simple truth. The weary mind finds rest not by achieving something, but by allowing itself to simply be. The body's wisdom emerges not when we direct it, but when we trust it. We lose ourselves not through effort, but through complete immersion. We flow like water, not by forcing, but by yielding. The stillness preceding thought is not something we create, but something we unveil that was always present. And now, at the conclusion of our journey together, we arrive at the simplest teaching of all. No mind is just this: being present, being whole, being at peace with what is. Not because everything is flawless, not because we have attained some special state, but because we have stopped dividing ourselves. We have ceased our search elsewhere. We have returned home. As you rest here now, there is no need to seek no mind. You do not need to achieve anything or become anyone different. You can simply be where you are, breathing this breath, feeling this body, hearing these words. This ordinary awareness is sufficient. This simple presence is the peace you have been seeking. Take a gentle breath. Feel yourself settling into this moment exactly as it is. There is nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to do. The thinking mind has worked diligently for a long time. It can rest now. Allow it to rest. Let everything rest. You are here. You are whole. You are home. As we approach the conclusion of our time together tonight, let yourself settle even deeper into repose. We have examined no mind from various perspectives. We have witnessed the fatigued mind find tranquility when it ceases to fight itself. We have felt the wisdom residing in the body, in the hands that remember what thinking cannot teach. We have observed the art of forgetting, where the self that observes and judges dissolves into wholeness. We have learned from water how to flow rather than force. We have touched the stillness that exists before thought begins. And we have returned home to the simple truth that what we seek is already here. You do not need to remember all of this. The narratives and lessons have fulfilled their purpose. They have taken root within you like seeds gently settling on tranquil soil. In their own time and manner, they will flourish. For now, there is nothing further required. The mind has absorbed what it needed to and can now find stillness. Allow it to find that stillness. Let the thoughts drift by like clouds traversing an open sky. There is no need to cling to them or to dismiss them. Just let them exist and permit yourself to exist. Your breath flows naturally. Your heart pulses without your guidance. Life unfolds itself through you, as it always has. You can have faith in this. You can find rest in this. Sleep will arrive when the time is right. There is no need to pursue it. Just embrace this moment, finding tranquility, rest, and completeness. Sleep deeply, and thank you for being part of this experience.